power on.
Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo, the man that some call the most dangerous man alive. Being joined by, quite frankly, this week on Sovryn Tech, someone who I consider the most dangerous woman alive. Woo! The magnificent, and some would say the maleficent.
Oh!
About that. None other than Ellen Sovryn, joining Brian Sovryn, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, on this week's Sovryn Tech. And, wow, it's been a little while since you've been on, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Not that you've been far away. In fact, quite the opposite.
I'm always right next to you when you record.
Literally. and especially, well, you know what? Okay, so we have a lot of new listeners into Sovryn Tech.
Which, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Tell them, give them a little introduction to Ellen Sovryn. What are you up to these days?
So, as the creative director of Sovryn Tech,
Ooh,
I'm quite glad to be back at my old position. For the last few months, I was busy completing coursework for my chemical engineering degree.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I'm on summer break, I have plenty of time to be back. But the last few months, I've been basically slaving away every moment of the day, just trying to, achieve that milestone.
Let me ask you this. So what do you prefer? I have a couple questions. And we've got great stories, or we actually have one big story that plays off of a story you sent me a couple weeks ago, and that I covered in an episode. We're going to get into that, and we're going to do some reviews. It's going to be a good time. Let me ask, do you prefer the term scientist or engineer?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. So the field of engineering that I'm studying, which is bioengineering and chemical engineering,
right.
It's sort of it's a relatively new field, even in terms of engineering.
It's a bit of a hybrid, though, wouldn't you say?
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination of biological sciences and engineering principles. So, I don't know. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and I love the term scientist because I don't just study, chemistry or biology. I'm into literally every field of science that there could be, at least to some degree. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I can speak the technical language and I understand basic principles. I don't know. So engineering, it's very specific. It's very narrow. Scientist, I feel like encompasses more of the explorer in me.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think they both apply. I just didn't know if there's one that you preferred, or you just want to use them when they work.
It really depends on the context.
Yeah.
Because like if I'm looking for a job, then yes, I'm an engineer. I'm not just a scientist. But in everyday life, I'm a scientist. I love investigating things. Like that's the basis of science, is like questioning and researching.
Right.
So
now,
that's just what I love.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I love about you.
I love that about you too.
Yeah.
Because I know you are that. Very much so.
Absolutely. Exploration, name of the game, inside and outside. Absolutely. But anyway, so you're attending university, but this gets into the second question that I have. And this gets into, well, a lot, of course, what everybody's talking about these days, even though it does seem like it's tapering off a little bit. COVID-19. Now, because of this, you just rolled your eyes.
Yeah, well, it's been it started out as a buzzword, and I expected it to like taper off, but it hasn't. It's still the buzzword.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now this is unique though. So this semester, now are you have your associates?
Yes.
Okay, and you're going for your
bachelor's.
Right. Okay, so that's your end game for right now.
Yes, for now.
Of course, people like us, always growing. Always,
Yeah, never settle.
Right.
I mean,
education continues forever.
I'm not saying that my bachelor's is the end of the road. Like, maybe I'll go on in my education. I don't know. But for now, I think I can be happy just achieving that.
Sure. And you're fucking brilliant. So
thank you.
But this semester was a unique animal for a lot of universities, a lot of colleges, a lot of institutions of learning, regardless of stripe or scope.
Mm-hmm.
In that, now when I said earlier that we've been together literally like all the time, I mean, we're here right now. We're in BDSM Studio 3. We're sitting across from each other. I have my Blue Yeti X in between us, and we're both sharing that. Okay. But your desk just runs a straight line off of the studio desk.
Yes.
And you're right there. And you've been right there because
literally feet away.
Right. Because you have been doing your courses from home.
Yes.
And you've had to.
I have had to. And I know I rolled my eyes at COVID-19. It's really affected everything.
Sure, right.
Like every aspect of life for me.
Right.
And I'm sure for everyone is different.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it's just so strange not having to drive onto campus and walk half a mile to my, the building that I'm taking courses in.
With your 80-pound rucksack on your back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, especially as a student, it was a little saddening because I take several courses every semester that include lab work. Mm-hmm. And the labs at the university that I'm attending are really good. They're designed for research. I mean, it's a major research institute.
Sure.
So I miss that. Like, I miss getting to play with all those cool toys, and I miss interacting with people like other students, even though, maybe I don't like relate to them as well as I do to you, but it's still, it adds to the richness and variety of life, And even just leaving the house every day, it was a privilege that I took for granted. And now I'm at home with you all the time. And it's not that I don't love it. It's just very different.
Yeah. Well, this is, and same. I mean, like I was used to being home fairly alone, quite a bit, and I love having you home. But there's, like something that I think we both did, like say while we were apart, we'd pop on an audiobook, right? Like on your way to class, you'd be listening to an audiobook or something like that, and there's just like a lot of little things that you sort of stop, or you don't stop, but it's different.
Yeah. It's like, I don't have set time to listen to NPR. So I don't listen to NPR. I don't have a set time to listen to audiobooks or music. So I don't listen to that stuff as much.
Right. And we haven't been able to go to the gym. I mean, at all.
No
we've
gym.
Been slowly improving our home gym. Mm-hmm. But that's been something. That's
been a process. And like even the last few weeks, we haven't had time to do workouts at home.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, you've been so nonstop. That's the nature of this level of education, I think.
It was my senior year. I was taking like the capstone projects and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, It was a lot, and I was doing 5 courses at once, which typically people only do 3 or 4. So it was a little more than I'm used to.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
But I think I was able to handle it well because being at home, you're not transitioning between one place and another. So it like gives you that little added boost of efficiency.
Right.
You know, where you can just focus on one thing and you don't have to go anywhere. You just sit there and focus. And if you have to go to the bathroom, it's your own toilet and it's right there. You don't have to walk like 200 meters down the hallway to find a bathroom.
Well, you had said this to me, and I think this is interesting to talk about because I don't know how often either my listeners or really any listeners would know what, you know, the education system or parts of the education system are like right now, you know, with quarantine and everything. Course. Okay. But I mean, you had said there were some advantages, like, for example, I mean, your schedule for your semester, you know, is so insane, so intense. You know, you had said to me that you don't know how, if you did have to go to class, you're not exactly sure how you would have been able to fit in getting so much done.
Yes, that's very true.
Right.
Because we had to stay home, we weren't able to complete some of the lab work that we had planned for the semester. Mm-hmm. And that was just canceled, or it was turned into a paper that we had to write about the topic. But we didn't actually have to go to the lab and perform the experiments, which is very time consuming.
Sure.
And it's also sometimes mind numbing.
Right.
But yeah, there were just a lot of things that didn't happen because we had to stay home. And also there were plenty of deadlines that got extended because so many students were having challenges.
Right.
There was actually quite a few emails sent out from the president and the provost of the university addressing this issue. Like, for students that lived on campus, they had to pack up and leave. And some of them didn't have places to go, or they had challenges in moving. So I imagine there's like so much struggle for a lot of the university population. Not so much for me because I have a home that's off campus.
Right.
So it didn't affect me as much, but I could imagine, you know, like lots of people being displaced and not really having that planned.
Well, let me ask on that. I mean, because now you're somebody, like we were saying earlier, like you love the scientific process. You love, I mean, you know, you love engaging in, you know, lab work. And I mean, is that fair?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Like you like being in those environments, and I'll just say it. I think that's fucking sexy. But anyway, I love that. But so now most of your classes were being done, or all of them were being done on Zoom, right?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the classes that I had were either lecture and lab or just lecture. So all of the lecture sections were done via a Zoom call, and you know, it was just like me sitting at a desk. I'd plug in the headphones and I'd take notes like usual. But yeah, that was a different experience too, because you don't get to raise your hand and ask questions.
Right.
Communication's completely different. You know, like you have to cut off people sometimes and you don't realize you're doing it. Or lately we've had like Wi-Fi issues. So that's a challenge too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Wi-Fi in Ice Planet Zero sucks here. There's no doubt about that.
Some days are better than others, but you know, some days it's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was one professor who took the Zoom calls kind of seriously. Like he recognized that there was security problems with Zoom.
Yeah.
And started requiring passwords, and he'd like email them to us before every lecture, but he was the only one, which I was surprised because I know you talked about on your show a few weeks ago how Zoom has major security issues.
Yeah.
And
some of which they're solving, but yeah.
But there were a lot of instances of Zoom bombing and like people saying, oh
boy.
Or like showing porn on people's screens.
Yeah.
And like saying lewd things about the professors.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of bad stuff happening. And I was amazed that he was the only one in the university that really was concerned about that happening.
Yeah. Well, so that leads me, I mean, part of my question here, which is, how do you feel the rest of the student body like handled this? I mean, do you think, because this would seem to be, and I think I talked about this on a recent Sovryn Tech, that like employers who are using Zoom to communicate, or a lot of these things. Like they are asking, hey, okay, while you're on the clock, you need to leave your webcam on at all times. Okay. Because they think people have a penchant to, to slack off. Right.
Of course.
I mean, like I was saying earlier, you love, the education, the the scientific process, the lab process, all that.
I love digging into the learning.
Right. But now your peers, how do you think they handled it? Because you are an exceptionally abnormal, and I say that in the most beautiful, respective way. You are an exceptionally abnormal person. How do you think the normies, handled this?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's a huge compliment.
I don't say that about many people. It's true.
And secondly, the peers, at least as far as I could see, so there was one class that I was taking that was very small, and everybody in the class was friends with each other.
Yeah.
So in that course, which was special because I was actually taking it through a smaller local college, where people are far more personable with each other.
Sure.
And I think that sort of lent to a relationship where everyone felt comfortable having their cameras on and their microphones on throughout most of the lectures that we had.
Right.
And they talked to the professor as if she was their friend, So it was more like an equitable relationship between everyone. So in that course, everybody paid attention, and they were attentive, and they interacted. Albeit some people were literally smoking weed on camera during that course. I saw a bong. I saw quite a few vaporizers.
Yeah.
But in my other courses, the larger university courses that have like anywhere between 37 and 80 participants in any Zoom call, that I don't know. I'm fairly certain that lots of people didn't show up to those, but were relying on the recording to be posted later. Because like there was one lecture I had that was at 8 a.m. And who wants to get up that early when you're staying at home all the time? Yep. I'm sure people were sleeping in all, they're like until 11 a.m. just so that, because they had the privilege of watching it at a later time that was convenient to them, which I don't know how they handled that, because I couldn't do it. I would just lose track of time and lose my schedule and go completely bonkers, not knowing what to do. But there's an added layer of complexity to this because of the extenuating circumstances with COVID-19, we were allowed to choose the pass or fail option instead of a letter grade.
Which basically means no matter what you did, as long as it was enough to pass, you passed. As long as there wasn't going to be a direct score.
Right. It didn't affect your GPA, essentially.
Right.
So either...
But it didn't improve it either. It didn't negatively impact it or positively impact it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And for a lot of seniors who did not wish to go on to graduate school or a master's degree or whatever, they chose that for classes that they thought they were going to get like less than a B or C in.
Right.
Which kind of lent to people not giving their best efforts, because as long as you are sure that you're going to pass, it doesn't matter if you get a B or a D plus, you're going to pass.
Right.
So I think a lot of people, because of that, took the last half of this semester pretty easily. And there were times where I was taking courses where we had to do presentations. And I'm fairly certain that most people, after they presented, they would just walk away. Yep. And they would leave, they would still be logged into the Zoom call, so it would look as if they were present, but they weren't actually there.
So there was no requirements for you to have your camera on at all times. Like nobody was laying that kind of thing out.
No, nobody was, except once. There was a presentation I was doing for one course where I was required to have my camera on the entire time and my microphone. And I felt somewhat violated by that, but at the same time, it wasn't something that I couldn't handle.
Sure.
You know, I have this like wooden panel thing that I can move, and I put that behind me.
Right.
So that nobody could see my background. And I know Zoom does that. Like they have backgrounds that you can choose to play, like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, or like the Bahama Islands or something.
Right.
So anyway, it like that did feel uncomfortable, and I always have tape over my camera.
Well, I thought this is funny. If you're okay with talking about this for a second.
Sure.
Speaking of the student body, speaking of your peers.
Oh, my peers.
So, because you had to work with them a little bit in a different fashion, right?
Yes.
And maybe at times because you're using Zoom, you had to screen share and so on. Okay?
Yeah, which screen sharing is a completely different thing. That's a controlled environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And credit to, I think Zoom lets you choose. Because I mean, with my clients, I've had to use Zoom a lot more recently too, even though I already was with some of them, and that's by their choice, not mine. But you can choose to like only show your browser window, right, or only a tab and things like this. So you can be pretty, like you say, it can be very controlled. Mm-hmm. But you were telling me that your what would you call them? I don't know, group members, whatever, or fellow students,
classmates.
There we go. They, they got a little window, no pun intended. They got a little window into your life, into what you do. We have an alien species, and we'll talk more about aliens later. He's about to crawl over.
We have a cat that's crawling around on the table.
Captain, he's right under the microphone. Do you have something to say, Captain? I guess not. Okay.
He's just brushing his tail on the mic.
Ow!
No.
Oh, he's got a little something. All right. Anyway, that might have gotten on the audio. I don't care. Anyway, we love them all on this show. All right. So he's so cute. Yeah. Go to your ready room, Captain. There you go. His ready room is a little box in the back that he just suddenly fell in love with. I forget what we even got in there. But anyway, it's just this Amazon box. That's a fairly good size. And maybe we got a box stepper in it or something. I don't know. Anyway. And he just fell in love with it. He just fell in love with that box. And I mean, if he ever defecates in there, like, take that, Bezos, anyway. So that said, so they got your classmates got a little window into your life, and like they would ask you, as I understand it, they would ask you to turn on video, and you're like, hold on, I have to take the sticker off of my camera. They'd ask you to search something when you were kind of team leading, and they'd see you using DuckDuckGo. And I mean, what were the reactions to these things?
Oh my gosh.
Such simple things, but what were the reactions?
Well, so first they were saying like, Ellen, why don't you ever turn on your camera? And I was like, well, I have a sticker over it, and I just don't want to take the sticker off. It'd be too much of a hassle, and I'd have to stick it back on afterwards. And I don't have, these are special Tetris stickers. I don't want to waste them,
Sure.
But really, I'm just making excuses because I don't want my camera uncovered at any point in time. I don't even want a camera on my laptop.
Right on.
Yeah, I just feel like it's a vector for literally anyone to see into the room that I have this laptop.
At any given moment.
At any moment.
Yeah.
I don't know when that's going to be. I'm just assuming that it's at all times.
Right.
I listen to what Edward Snowden has to say.
Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
I care.
Here we go.
Oh, that's all right.
No, go ahead. All right, keep going. You care.
Yeah, I care.
Now, what about
my
DuckDuckGo?
privacy. DuckDuckGo, I use it to not keep my search history, which I really appreciate. I don't want like an online profile being built up around me because I search some pretty weird stuff. So anyway, I told them about the camera and they were like, what are you talking about? What are you scared of? What are they going to see?
Yeah.
It was the typical, like, if you don't have anything to hide, why are you worried?
Yeah.
Sort of argument. And they thought it was funny.
Okay.
And then they saw my DuckDuckGo browser and that just blew the lid off it. Like, what are you scared of? The CIA's watching you or some hacker is going to get you? And I'm like, well, I don't have to live in fear because I took these precautions, but you should all be concerned.
Right.
You should all pay attention to these sorts of things. It's important.
Yeah. I mean, we were going for a walk and we were talking about it. And and you're telling me this and I'm just like, what? I mean, I use this word too often, but I'm just going to run with it. Like, that's terrifying. that, because it's not like, you're not going for a business degree, and that's no disrespect to people that go for a business degree or the seriousness of a business degree. Okay. But these are people who I think conventionally we would consider a cut above, right? Conventional, like they're going into very hardcore sciences, to put it mildly.
Sure.
Right. I'm not saying anybody whatever you're doing, you're doing it. You're going for your education. Your education's your education. I'm not knocking any level of this. Okay. I'm just saying that conventionally, this is how this stuff's perceived.
At least they have an additional amount of motivation and ambition from like the baseline, because they're trying to further their education beyond what is required.
Right. You would think. And they are going into, again, a very bleeding edge field of science and engineering.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. When those people don't get, it's not like where would you say, and I'm not looking for a pat on the back or anything, because if it's not me, that's fine. Where would you say, what made you consider it? Well, you mentioned Edward Snowden about putting, tape over your camera, using DuckDuckGo. Like, where'd you get that from?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say where it originated from. I've gathered a lot of information over the time. I guess it reached a certain critical point after I started listening to your show where I was like, all right, I should probably take some action on this. I can't just like know about it and not do anything.
Yeah, so I shamed you into it. That's good. But no, but okay.
Well, I felt empowered after I did it.
Sure. But I've seen DuckDuckGo ads on television. It's out there. It's not like the message isn't out there, but these are they're not like, it doesn't take a course in a semester to get you to learn how to put, tape over a camera or a sticker over a camera and use a different fucking search engine, right?
Yeah.
And so for them to not grasp this and not want to engage in it, like that terrifies me, that the best and brightest don't understand the importance of these things. But go ahead.
Well, another thing too is that my classmates are a few years younger than me.
Uh-huh.
So they might not have as much life experience. But it still doesn't take that much time living in the modern world to see like a handful of stories where someone's camera was taken over.
Right.
Or like, somebody had their personal information stolen. So, these are things that you hear about from time to time and you're like, wow, that's scary. But once you hear it enough times, you start wondering, like, is this going to happen to me?
Yeah. It's really, it's in the future. Okay. I see this going one of two ways. I'm sure there are more. There are always more than two ways, but I see this going one of two ways. You're either going to, or people, not you, but people in general. Okay. Young people. They're either going to just in the future have to fucking accept that everybody, and I mean everybody, and I don't care even if you're sitting in the pews, you know who you are. Everybody's a freak, okay? The marriage bed is undefiled. I know you're defiling it. But and I don't mean you, Ellen. We do our fair share of defiling all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, baby.
But we don't have any pretensions about it.
No. We're totally open. In fact, frankly, you want to talk about miracles. It's a goddamn miracle that we even have 2 free hours where we're not, doing the horizontal polka to even record a podcast here, all right? We don't need to talk about what was happening last night in the middle of town. But, no. Oh shit, a car's coming. That was happening. Anyway, okay. All right. So this goes one of two ways. Either everybody just admits that they're a fucking freak, or, and this is the scary part, or they get controlled because you know what? That picture you took at that party that you went to when, now it's there for the entire internet to remember for all time. And that's going to affect you if the social mores don't change. Now, social mores have dramatically changed, admittedly, even in just the past 10 years. But, if that doesn't change, this stuff is going to come back to haunt all of these people because they didn't even take the simple actions that you take, Ellen. And not that you're a simple person. I'm just saying that they're basic actions.
And another thing, I never store photos on the cloud. I use a hard drive.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody remembers the fappening.
Exactly. Well, no. You remember it. I remember it. Sovereign Tech remembers it and brings it up often, but most people, I think they've totally forgotten about it. Even the fucking celebrities, I guarantee you, they don't even bother thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this generation. I mean, they just feel so comfortable leaving their cameras on when they're walking around their house. Like, one kid walked into his sister's bedroom and showed us all his sister's dirty bedroom, said hi to her, and then left and said, yeah, that was my sister. And I was like, that's not cool. You can't just walk into someone's room while your camera's on while you're on a Zoom call and show her bedroom off to the entire fucking internet.
Yeah, they don't care.
No.
See...
It's just, like, privacy does not compute with them. It's not a thing. I don't,
and I try to figure out, like, what's the mindset behind this? Is it just because it's just what they consider to be normal? I can't imagine that, because privacy is a biological, it's not a process, but it's a byproduct of biological processes, in my opinion. Okay. Nobody likes to be watched. Nobody likes to be watched.
No, I don't want to be judged while I'm on the toilet.
Right.
You know?
Right. I mean, if you're choosing, consciously that you want to be watched and you're into that, okay, that's different. You know, if you're an exhibitionist, fine. Mm-hmm. But in general, people act differently when they're being watched. We just know this. This is just humans across the board. It doesn't matter who or what or where, you know? And so I'm trying to figure out, all I can imagine is that there is some hope that they garner some kind of celebritydom. I mean, that's one of the conclusions I've come to, is that must be what drives this, is that they are hoping that they're going to do something really, I don't know, stupid or somehow amazing, though I can't imagine that, on camera that's going to get them, I don't know, a viral tweet. I mean, maybe, what do you think's behind it?
I think that's looking a little too far into it. For some people, yes. Uh-huh. But I think for the majority of people, like who I was just referencing, you know, my classmates, I think they feel so comfortable having their lives completely exposed all the time like that, because that's how it's always been for them. You know,
so you think it is that? See,
I think they've spent their entire lives with cameras around them and microphones and the internet and interconnected devices. And it's so normal. It's like an extension of their body. I think they've been completely acclimated to it.
It's impossible for me to fathom. I mean, because I just...
Well, you didn't grow up like that.
No, thanks Satan. I mean, I grew up without the internet. I mean, it kind of existed, but like, again, I always say the internet didn't enter the homes really in a practical, usable way where you could actually spend hours on it. I want to say it didn't really show up until like 95.
So I'm not going to say that makes a huge difference. I mean, anybody can learn to have safe practices online.
Yep.
But I think it comes down to like the level of concern and the feeling of safety. Like, they don't feel that those bad things are going to happen to them. You know, it's like people who have a few drinks and then get into their car and drive off, because every time they've done that previously, they've been fine. What's to say that this time is any different?
Yeah. See, that's a problem, you know, that so many of our species, I'll use that lightly, that so many, you know, they don't plan. They don't think things ahead of time, and they basically just take actions until you know, the handle of the pan burns them. And I hate to think that that's how we have to learn, because that is no disrespect to animals, that's an animalistic way of learning.
Certainly. It's literally like being trained.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to a very broad problem that there's no way we're going to solve here, but or at least not in one episode. That's for damn sure. But that all of that, like, this has really been COVID-19 overall has been a learning experience, and I think it's shown a lot of society's true colors. And certainly we're learning a lot. and I mean, even just in what, like, you've told me about, and what you've experienced. I mean, it's really, and a lot of it's not good. And also, I was kind of hopeful that there would be like really dramatic changes where people would start caring about all kinds of things, caring about what matters, maybe not caring so much about money, maybe caring more about privacy, maybe caring more about planning ahead. So, if something really, really terrible happens, like that you could survive it and so on. But no, it sounds like it just brings out the animal. And I don't like using that word in the pejorative because usually I use it in the positive. But in this case, it brings out our worst instincts.
Well, it does seem like people are learning to plan as far as disinfecting goes and paying attention to the microbial world. More.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, it's not as if people understand the nature of microbes and viruses. Like, so for example, a virus can be killed with any sort of soap. It doesn't matter whether it's antibacterial, antimicrobial.
Right.
Just soap in general dissolves the lipids that contain the protein that is a virus, because it's not really a living thing. It's just like a simple shell of genetic material. So like any soap is going to get rid of it. And yet like hand sanitizer and cleaning solutions and all, like literally everything is just disappearing off the shelves.
Right.
Or at least it was for the longest time.
Right.
Now, fortunately, like things are starting to show back up on the shelves.
Yeah, be a little more on the normal availability side. Yep.
So I'm just saying, like, people are responding to this and they're starting to plan ahead. And it not that they've like really educated themselves on like how to do this. I wouldn't make that assumption. I think people are just going to like the strongest, most sure method of making sure that like everything is completely clean. But it is unfortunate that it took such a dramatic event for people to start being concerned about this.
Right. Regardless of the reality around the event, it's really, yeah, absolutely. It is a shame. Something I was thinking about this. Did you have a comment you wanted to make there?
No, go for it.
Okay. I was thinking about this. Like how can people get more educated on this? Because, people need education on this across the board. Okay. Because you got people who think this is all fake, a giant nefarious conspiracy, right? Then you have people who just, if they think it's real, they're not taking it seriously enough and they don't have enough knowledge to understand exactly what the news is telling them. And bottom line being, regardless of where you are, say in some of that spectrum, okay, most people don't have a really solid foundation of even the most basic medical knowledge. And I think that would help cut through a lot of the crap that you see online or that you hear in the news or however you encounter this information, is if you had just a basic medical knowledge. And I was thinking, like, how can we get people to get into that, and as a species, speaking of, I guess, getting beyond our animal side a bit, but, getting closer to it as well. As a species, we're big on storytelling, like that's what we do. That's kind of our, art, I think, is at the core of human consciousness, whether everyone wants to admit that or not, or whether or not we've, been able to quantify that. It does appear to be so. And because the first things that we do that stand the test of time is, like cave art. Right? Yeah.
And storytelling is a way to pass on knowledge and experience without someone having to go through it themselves.
Right. So we have one of the technologies that we have, in fact, we already mentioned it, like listening to audiobooks, right? That's an amazing thing for a lot of reasons, and you don't have to do it as audiobooks, but I think that's an advantageous way to listen to things quickly because you can usually listen faster than you can read. Also, I think we've been telling, as in speaking to each other, stories for thousands of years. It's practically a part of our genetic makeup at this point.
That's basically what we're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's part of the reason podcasts are so popular and, have been just steadily growing in popularity. But I was thinking about it, I'm like, if people would, and we're going to talk about this a little later on, actually, because we're going to do a movie review for a Michael Crichton, or based off of a Michael Crichton novel, who was one of the best as far as authors go, I think, of all time, certainly in the 20th century. we're gonna do a review of the Andromeda Strain. That's coming up, and I think that's relevant much to what we're talking about here. But I think that if people read Michael Crichton books, like his more scientific work, or like Robin Cook novels, right? If they just like read, I think if they read or listened to novels that had such, because like when you watch the Andromeda Strain, we'll talk about this later. In fact, it's even won awards in the past, just in this century. And that movie's from 1971 and the book as well. It's won awards in this century for being the most scientifically accurate presentation on film. Like that's literally an award that it's won.
couldn't argue with that.
Right. And it's a great movie. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but it's a great film. Okay. And it's considered one of the greats by most people, you know, and I get that it's a little boring, which probably comes from that scientific accuracy, right? Because, you know, you're not going to do anything too flashy, even though there's plenty of flash, I think, in that film. But I think you could get people, if you present them with medically accurate, scientifically accurate stories like Robin Cook or Michael Crichton, and there's others too who write this stuff and they do great work. If you could present that to them and just listen to those and like you could integrate from those authors specifically, none of this horse shit on CBS or Netflix that's just absolutely full of crap and totally, what's the word I'm looking for? Not fantasized, but
fantastical.
Yeah. Fantastical might be a good word for it. That, you know, that's meant where the science is meant to merely forward the story and not where the science is meant to be accurate, or, you know, if it's even science. But like getting into this hardcore stuff, I think that's a great way that people could, just listening to these books, I think can actually build up your foundation of how all this shit works.
Yeah, it is really challenging, I think, for science fiction when you're listening to it to know what's real science and what's not.
Yeah.
Unless you already have a background in that area. But certainly the Andromeda Strain is one where it's real and you could listen to it and learn something. Well,
that's what I'm saying, particularly like a Michael Crichton or a Robin Cook, where they are, you know, they're recognized for their accuracy. They're actually, you know, especially like Robin Cook, you know, they're professionals in their field, or were, because not all these authors are with us anymore. And, you know, and granted, you know, this stuff changes all the time, but it's like watching Cosmos over and over again. Even if some of the stuff in Cosmos is wrong now, or is proved to be inaccurate, you're still getting a beautiful foundation of a lot of scientific concepts that, dare I say, were prophetic at the time, you know, in 1980 or 81 when that came out. I mean, it's still good stuff to know. But then even when you when you encounter, say, the modern information, you can easily just integrate it, you know, because you have that foundation. That's so fucking key. And
yeah, that's what all of education about, is just making those connections.
Right.
And like learning to recognize something and associate it with something else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the most powerful way for anybody, even if they're not like, you know, somebody who, say, loves the process like you do, Ellen, you know, I think, I mean, I've read Robin Cook books and cookbooks. It's a cookbook. No, I've read Robin Cook's works, or quite a few of them. And I'm not, and I've readily admitted that like medical science is not my cup of tea, as you sip from your own cup of tea.
Delicious green tea.
Yeah, delicious. But it's not, you know, but I still know that how the value in doing that. And I think it's really helpful. And I think that's something that everybody, if they wanted something actionable, what the fuck do I do about this right now? I don't care what end of the spectrum you sit on how you feel about COVID-19, increasing your medical knowledge, and especially in a novel form where they're a thriller or a mystery, because then it's about figuring it out, right? It's not just like X plus Y equals Z, right? No, this is figuring it out, which that's the beautiful path of knowledge. Okay. And so I think this is one of the best things that people could do. You know, go grab some of those books, go watch the Andromeda Strain. I mean, hell, if it's a great movie on the matter, fine. But movies often don't present the same accurate, or the same detailed information like a novel would. But yeah, you don't want to sit down and read a book. Reading a book makes you tired or something like that. Fine, crank out an audiobook, you know, and I think it'd be a beautiful thing. So any thoughts on that, Ellen?
Yeah, no, I agree. as a person who's read the novel and seen the movie now of Andromeda Strain, I would say, you know, the book certainly gives you a lot more detail, but the movie is still an accurate, it represents the novel without distorting it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk about that later. But we got a story to get into.
Let's do it.
Speaking of life and other life. Real quick though, what are you reading right now? What do you got going on your audiobooks?
So just earlier today, I was listening to Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan and Androyan.
Okay, that's a hell of a book. I read that a lot. I mean, that came out like 94. I want to say.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, I think it was 94, and it's a direct. For people that don't know, it's billed as the direct sequel to Cosmos. So if you loved Cosmos, which we were just talking about, I highly recommend this book as well, and I'm sure you would too, Ellen, even though you're not finished with it yet.
Yes, I would highly recommend it. The first few chapters are actually read by Carl Sagan himself, which they're actually old recordings that were discovered, and they were only able to recover a few hours of that audio. So the rest of the book was narrated by Androyan, who was Carl Sagan's spouse. Right.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. That's one where I want the audiobook because to hear Carl Sagan, talking, I mean, that's just worth its weight in gold.
And this book specifically contains what is called the Pale Blue Dot soliloquy, where Carl is talking about, the rivers of blood that have been spilled for people to have power over a tiny portion of this pale blue dot.
Man, sounds like a Dream Theater song. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah. There's no one out there to save us from ourselves.
Woo. All right. Well, that's a great pick. I think that's dynamite. I've been listening to myself a lot of great courses I've been listening to lately. Anyway, we won't get into the details of those, but I'm sure the fruits of that labor will show itself somewhere in the Sovryn Tech universe. But anyway, yeah, why don't we get into our story here? But quick, just before we do, this 2 hours of Brian and Ellen not getting it on is is brought to you by Free Talk Live.
And we really, got to be something special for us to do that.
I know. Jeez. So, but freetalklive.com, Sovryn Tech sponsor. So honored as always to have them as a sponsor throughout 2020. Actually, they re-upped for the entire year as 2019. Our relationship did so well. You got to check it out. This is a show that runs 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night. You can go to their website. Okay, now it's on terrestrial radio. It is the number 26 talk show in the United States. It is an open phones call-in show. Your voice can get heard if you want to call in, but you can even just go to their website, go to freetalklive.com, and there is access to over a decade, I believe. I think you can get all of those, of episodes. And again, we're not just talking like we're Sovryn Tech where it's once a week or so. No. 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night that you get to go and check out. In fact, if you go a few years back, boy, if you go back to some Friday nights, what are they going to hear, Ellen?
I was the host for a few months.
Yeah, they might hear you. And yeah,
a much younger me.
Yes, but I remember listening to it. You were absolutely brilliant. You made Free Talk Live Friday nights a must listen for me, and it was dynamite. So Thank you. What were the years for that? When was that 2014?
Wow. Yes, it must have been like 2014.
That, somewhere around there. So folks, you can go check that out those Friday nights. Do you not want them to go and check it out? Your eyes are going wide.
I'm blushing.
No, it's a good time.
They can check it out too. They can also check out when you were a host.
Oh, you had to bring that up. No, no, it's an honor. I did it for a couple of years. I was on Sunday nights. And it was just a great time and an absolute honor. And, who knows what the future holds. But anyway, freetalklive.com. You can check out the past, the present, and the future there. And we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech, an absolute honor. So actually, Ellen, I mean, it's fair to say, like, we really kind of both got our audio careers started on that show. Is that fair?
Well, It was certainly on that network, yes.
Yeah. Oh, no, because you did other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a show called Ladies and Keen.
Yep.
And then after that, yeah.
What else was
Oh, so Ladies and Keen, then Free Talk Live, and then ALP, and then several other things that were not related to the LRN.FM family.
but brilliant stuff out there.
Thank you.
I mean, really. Well, anyway, I've touted your work for many years. So anyway, it is beautiful that we could, especially now that you're off from school for a little bit. I mean, hell, we could do all kinds of work together.
Woo!
So got a nice open schedule there.
Yeah,
but
it's going to be a roller coaster this summer.
Hell yes. If you can get us behind the mic. But anyway. All right. So you shared a story with me a few weeks ago. And then a couple episodes ago, I decided to, or, I was going to cover it. I mean, if you send me something, I'm going to talk about it. But it had to do with particularly, and this story is making the rounds now.
Mm-hmm.
I keep seeing it pop up in varying feeds, and like someone talks about it again and talks about it again. That particularly 3 videos that the United States Navy considers to be, we don't know, it's UFO footage. Of course, they now call it UAPs, which I think is a brilliant move. I already talked about all that.
Yeah, give it some freshness.
Yeah. Get it
rid
away
of the
from
baggage.
some of the baggage. Exactly. Yeah. Right. But these are, for lack of better, to introduce them quickly, these are, videos of UFOs that they just don't know what it is, and they admit it. Like, no, we can't explain this. And it's something, it's legit, but we don't know what the fuck it is. And so understandably, that's making a lot of news because, it's not just, some restaurant or some hotel chain owner talking about it. It's actually, or it's not Jimmy Carter. It's actually, like the U.S. Navy who has to do something with this data and has to take it seriously. But, fuck the Navy. Anyway, there was a particularly interesting story that after, let's see, so that was May 9th, I think. Just hours after I released the episode of Sovryn Tech where I covered this, Vox, V-O-X, they did a story where they interviewed a guy, Alexander Wendt, okay, about basically these 3 videos and the seriousness of this all, okay? And I shared it with you, and you read it. You loved it. You loved the interview. Yeah,
and also he did a TED Talk prior to the interview.
Right.
That was about this story specifically, and he was brilliant.
Yeah.
He's just really, he cut to the core of what was going on.
Yeah. So the link is in the show notes for the story that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about, we're going to go over. And embedded in that story is the TED Talk that you can check out. So if people want to listen to that as well, and I also recommend it, you do, Ellen.
Yes.
Yeah. Alexander Wendt, clearly brilliant guy and humble when he needs to be, which I think is great.
And he approaches it from a totally logical standpoint.
Sure.
He doesn't make any assumptions when he's going into it.
Yeah, and I think as we go through this, what's interesting is he mentions a lot of things that basically I had said as well. When I covered the story that you sent me for on that episode of Sovryn Tech. So anyway, the title of the Vox story is "It's Time to Take UFOs Seriously." Like it's seriously twice. Alexander Wendt is one of the most influential political scientists alive. Here's his case for taking UFOs seriously. So I'm going to read it here, and then we'll kind of break in and comment. And if you want to just cut in at any point, Ellen, you just...
all right. I'll swing with my sword.
Free Talk Live rules. If you want to get on the radio, you got to open your mouth, right? I know you know how to do this. You're told.
Don't be modest.
Yeah. Woo. Anyway, so here we go. The Pentagon recently released 3 videos of UFOs recorded by the Navy, one taken in 2004 and the other in 2015. The videos, which first leaked a couple of years ago, show, well, it's not exactly clear. There are various objects, 2 of which look like aircraft, spinning through the sky and moving in ways that defy easy explanation. As the images bop across the screen, you can hear the pilot's excitement and confusion in real time as they track whatever it is they're seeing. I'm not what you would call, and this story, by the way, is by Sean Illing, who is also interviewing Alexander Wendt. So that's who the first person perspective is here. I'm not what you would call a UFO enthusiast, but the videos are the most compelling I've ever seen. They seem to confirm, at the very least, that UFOs are real. Not that aliens exist, but that there are unidentified objects buzzing around the sky. Now, do I think aliens are real? Yeah, probably. Are they flying spaceships into our atmosphere? Who the hell knows? The best anyone can say is that there's a non-zero chance that some of these UFOs were made by non-human hands, and that, I'd argue, is reason enough to talk about them. But it's barely cracked the news cycle. Even in a pandemic, you'd think we'd have a little time for UFO talk. So in an attempt to force a UFO conversation into the public discourse, I contacted Alexander Wendt, a professor of international relations at Ohio State University. Wendt is a giant in his field of IR theory, but in the past 15 years or so, he's become an amateur UFOologist. Anyway, they talk about his articles and TED Talk, all linked here. Wendt is about the closest thing you'll find to a UFO expert in a world in which UFOlogy isn't a real science. Like other enthusiasts, he spent a lot of time looking at the evidence, thinking about the stakes, and theorizing about why extraterrestrials wouldn't visit Earth in the first place. In this conversation, anyway, which has been lightly edited for clarity, we discuss why scientists refuse to take UFOs seriously, why he thinks there's a good chance ETs are behind the aircraft in the videos, and why he believes the discovery of extraterrestrial life would be the most significant event in human history. So here's Sean Illing. Do you believe in extraterrestrial life? Alexander Wendt. Well, it's kind of like asking if somebody believes in God. It's just an odd question. I certainly believe that it's very likely there's extraterrestrial life somewhere in the universe, and I suspect even most scientists might agree with that now. The real question is, are ETs here? And that's obviously a much more debatable question. So I want to stop on that, Ellen. And now, first off, I like that on Sovryn Tech, we like to be very specific with terms. And I will often try to introduce or reintroduce terms that maybe have fallen out of fashion that I think need to be back in fashion. And when I first talked about these 3 videos, that was one of my primary points to get into, is that stop using the word aliens. We need to say extraterrestrials. Okay. Or
these aren't people coming from Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. And also, even within the hypotheses of, say, UFOlogy, which even then I'll agree with the Navy on this, that UAPs, I think, is a great term to start using to get, like you said, to get rid of that baggage. Okay. So I think using UAPs, using the term extraterrestrials, which I'm glad they're being specific here, and we'll find out why they're being specific, because like I laid out in my episode, there's a couple other possibilities if this stuff is non-human hands, right? Like Sean was saying. You have interdimensional terrestrials, right? Or what they call ultra-terrestrials. There's other terms. But you have what's called the interdimensional hypothesis, the IDH, okay? Which means that they're here, but they are on another plane, basically, of existence. They're in another dimension, like something within M theory or something like that. Or you have crypto-terrestrials, which are basically, we'll use the term aliens in this one case. They are aliens that are non-human intelligence, but they're already, they're actually, they co-evolved on Earth. Like they evolved on Earth just like humans did. Okay. But they are not human. So you have those at least 3 possibilities, to get into. So using the term extraterrestrials, I think, is essential in having any kind of intelligent conversation.
So the third extraterrestrial is just something that evolved on a completely different planet that has traveled here.
That would be an extraterrestrial.
Right. So
right.
I'm sorry, you just mentioned the 2. So
Right. There's extraterrestrial, cryptoterrestrial, and I guess we'll say ultra-terrestrial or IDH.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm glad that they're going down that road and they're using the term ETs, because we need that to have this conversation, especially around these 3 videos. What is it? Is it human? Okay. If it's not human, then we got to classify very quickly what we're talking about. Even with something as crazy, well, let me ask you this before we go further. What do you think are the possibilities of I think you and I both agree, extraterrestrials, just like Alexander Wendt was saying, yeah, sure, there's probably some sapient life out there in the universe somewhere. Like that'd be a tough mathematical pull to say there isn't.
It'd be utter hubris to say that we're the only intelligent species in the entire universe.
Absolutely. Pale blue dot would make a great case for that matter, too.
Well, I directly quoted Carl Sagan just now.
Which is why I brought up the book. But yes, yeah, exactly. So But now, how about ultra-terrestrials? We'll do the next two. How about ultra-terrestrials? Do you think that's a possibility?
This is getting into some weird territory.
Absolutely.
Because talking about different planes of existence, those are things that are purely theoretical.
Right.
There's no way for us to like measure that or have any real sense of what that literally means.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can only exist in the plane that we exist in. We can't cross over to whatever is out there. So how are we supposed to study things like that? We can't, except analytically, theoretically. So I don't know. I mean, do I think it's possible? Yes. Could I put a percentage to that? No.
Okay. No, that's fair. But it's possible. Sure.
Yeah. I would stake more money on either the extraterrestrial or crypto-terrestrial.
Okay. So that kind of answers the third question, or with the crypto-terrestrials. You think that is likely?
Oh, that there was a species that co-evolved on Earth with us?
Yeah.
Or even evolved previous to the existence of humans and took off.
And is still here? We don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. I think that there is a possibility that that's happened,
mm-hmm.
and that they're just outsmarting us and able to hide from us.
Sure. Okay. I'll tease here. There might be an upcoming user podcast in very short order that might cover some of this. So anyway, I'll drop that tease. But all right, fair enough. So let's go back to Sean Illing and Alexander Went here. Sean Illing, are they here? Alexander Went, I think the odds are high enough that we should be investigating it. It's as simple as that. Would you agree with that statement, Ellen?
Yes.
Okay. Sean Illing, why would aliens conceal their existence? I know you have theories on this. Alexander Went comes in. It's possible they've been here all along. And that, of course, Stanley breaking in, that gets to the crypto-terrestrial aspect, right? Is that, no, they've actually always been here. I mean, they could still be extraterrestrial and been here longer than humans have been on the stage, but I think that kind of points in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they're still here or that they went and colonized somewhere else in the solar system, but some of them stayed behind, Sure,
fair. Okay, let me read a little more of Alexander Went. And that's something, so it's possible they've been here all along, and that's something that I've been thinking about lately, which is a bit unsettling because it means it's their planet and not ours. They could just be intergalactic tourists. Maybe they're looking for certain minerals. It could just be scientific curiosity. It could be that they're extracting our DNA. I mean, who knows? I have no idea. All I know is that if they are here, they seem to be peaceful. Let me read this Sean Illing here. You've thought about this a lot, Alex. You must have a hunch as to which of those scenarios is most likely. Let me read the next part. Alexander Went, I think if they are here, they've probably been here a very long time. That's my guess. And look, there are medieval woodcuts that seem to show UFOs. There are UFO stories in the Bible, apparently, or at least stories that are interpreted that way. So I think they've probably been here a long time if they're here. Now, I mentioned the woodcuts. In actually the last episode that I talked about this. And so it's interesting that he brings that up. The biblical stories. I mean, I did a review of Joseph Blumerch's, who is a NASA scientist. I did a review of his book, The Spaceships of Ezekiel, which probably is covering what Alexander Went is talking about. But I thought it was brilliant. And I don't think he went enough in the cryptozoology. That's a whole other thing in the crypto-terrestrial vein in saying, I mean, I think this sentence in particular is really striking. What if it's their planet and not ours? And that's something like even I'm sure Sagan didn't even get into Pale Blue Dot. Like, I don't recall necessarily that kind of idea coming up, but like, it's one thing for, Sagan to make the argument, well, humanity's not as special as we like to claim that we are. But I mean, like, what if this isn't even our planet? I mean, it's ours as in we evolved here. Of course, some people would argue against that even. Okay. But, we could go there. But, like that, we're not the top of the food chain on this planet. How do you feel about that, Ellen?
Yeah, I prefer it being stated that way as opposed to saying that the planet belongs to any one species. It belongs to every species that inhabits here and has existed here for, as long as they've been alive.
Right.
Evolution has given rise to millions of different species.
Right.
Who's to say that it belongs to any one of them? So, like, if there is a more intelligent species that predates humanity, perhaps they feel, I don't want to say that like the planet belongs to them, but like they could be staying here out of a sense of like protection for the planet because we aren't doing it any favors. We're just fucking it up left and right.
That's a very Keanu Reeves Day the Earth Stood Still. Have you ever watched that? The Keanu Reeves one?
No.
Okay, we'll have to watch that at some point, but go ahead.
So anyway, yeah, maybe they are, higher on the food chain than us. And in that case, I would actually feel somewhat grateful if that were to be discovered to be true, because that would, and I think they get into it later on in this article, but that would essentially make military and government powerless.
But doesn't that lead, I have a couple things I want to get on here, okay? Hold that military note, all right? But I love your point, because I think it's a failing on our part to think of, now the Earth is our home in the universe. Yes, because it's where we have, but something being your home doesn't mean that it's yours, right? Doesn't mean that it solely belongs to you, just like, okay, just because, 6-year-old little Johnny doesn't pay the bills for the house, that's his home all the same. And he has as much, right to be there, I think, as anybody, does. Okay. So, the Earth, I think that's a really, really key point that a lot of people miss on, is that we shouldn't think of the Earth as like ours, as our property of some kind. It belongs to, it's a giant ecosystem of its own, and every part of it is just as important as the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for successful survival, we have to learn to co-inhabit with all of these species that live here.
Right.
Like, we can't blast away every blade of grass, every tree, every insect and bird and fish.
Yeah.
Because that would kill us.
Right. Ultimately.
And, we only inhabit, a small part of the planet. We're just on the surface. There are things that fly. There are things that swim. There's microbes that inhabit every square inch of our body.
Right.
We are not even the most close to the most populous.
Yeah, the best thing you can consider it is like that you somehow, I don't know, earn the right to exist here.
Oh, sure.
Because it's War of the Worlds, right? Sure, the Martians come, but guess what? The common cold just wiped you out and you're done. And because you had yet to basically, you didn't evolve here, you didn't earn the right, whatever that takes to get there, to be able to even just exist on this plot of land.
Well, we do by design fit perfectly on this planet, and we can co-inhabit with everything else that's here.
Right. But that's totally different than the Earth being our property.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you raised a really great point there. Now, the other thing that you got into, though, is how that militaries would be meaningless in the face of this other life form.
A greater intelligence.
A greater intelligence. But I worry, like, are they pulling the strings? Like, I did an episode in 2019 where I talked about what's called the zoo hypothesis, or even the quarantine hypothesis, which has nothing to do with COVID-19. Which is that, okay, why don't we see the aliens? It's because, they know we're here and they're making sure we don't ever leave. Or they're like maybe doing something closer to the Prime Directive or something like that, where they don't interfere. And basically this area of space is closed off. Okay. And that's why we don't encounter them. It's not like they don't know. It's because they're making sure that we don't encounter them. And my whole problem with that was that, like, holy shit, if that's true, no, please, interfere. Okay. Stop these fucking wars, this petty bullshit of so many people dying. Like, please come and stop it. Cut it off. All right. Or at the very least, make your presence known so that it puts the kibosh on the whole idea.
Well, maybe that's what they're trying to do. Is make their presence known.
I can understand the Lord works in mysterious ways, right? I don't know.
But, I think it's understandable that an alien species of greater intelligence would not want to interfere, one, with our evolution as a species or as a culture, or, and they also would not want to, like, take on the burden of our stupid decisions. But you're right. It does seem somewhat heartless that they don't intervene and teach us better ways of handling things.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was really great that he made the point early on that if they are here, they're peaceful. They would have to be if they've coexisted with us for so long.
Yeah, this is an older idea in UFOlogy, and I'll use that term for all the baggage there too, is that if you can travel the stars, if you can go faster than light or do whatever it takes to get from one star system to another, the argument goes is that you inherently must be peaceful. You must have made peace, because you could never, in a warlike culture, this is the idea that you could never in a war-torn culture or civilization build up the resources or be able to take the time to get to here. I don't know that I 100% believe that, because it's easy to argue that the atomic age would not have happened without, or at least could have happened later on, but it wouldn't have happened with such rapid development as it did during World War II, right? And I mean, obviously I'm as anti-war as they come. I'm the most peace-loving guy. Actually, I hate to say it, I'm the most peace-loving guy I know. I wish that weren't true. And I don't say that as like some kind of boast, like I'm measuring against other people, but I'm just saying, don't confuse me that I'm saying war is a good thing in any way. It's not. And it's never necessary, and it's never justified. Okay. There is no such thing as a net positive that comes out of war. That I just don't believe that for a second. So don't confuse me. But I don't know that I could imagine a war where, like, potentially something that resembles a very fast engine, because I also don't think fast and light travel really occurs or is possible, but a really impressive engine that could get you from A to B very quickly in the universe, or fairly quickly. I can imagine that getting developed in wartime. And so I don't know that I necessarily like buy that, but do you have anything to say on that?
I think we should continue reading the story, because a lot of this is really addressed.
Yeah. Fair. Okay, good point. So here we go. Reading on with Sean Illing. We're having this conversation because you've been very public about calling out a taboo against studying UFOs. What's your claim here? Alexander Wendt. It's very simple. There are things going on in the sky that are strange and do not have an obvious explanation. These are UFOs, and like any other unidentified phenomenon, human beings are curious creatures, and normally scientists will rush out to study whatever we find fascinating or puzzling. But in this case, scientists won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and that's the taboo. So even though the Navy is now saying, quote, hey, we've got UFOs on film and here they are, end quote, the scientists are still not going to study them. So there seems to be something blocking the scientific community from engaging this phenomenon, even though anything else even remotely this interesting would generate limitless research dollars. Then Sean Illing says, is this some kind of conspiracy of silence? How does a taboo like this take hold in the first place? Alexander Wendt, we argued in our 2000 academic paper that the modern state is what we call anthropocentric. Basically, that means human beings are sovereigns. In ancient times, it was the gods or nature that was thought to rule over everything. Now it's human beings, and this principle is embodied in the state. If you call that into question, if you call into question that the state is not the only potential sovereign here, the whole legitimacy of the state is called into question. Woo!
Yeah.
Wow. Hit that note, baby. Not going to say that Alexander Wendt is an anarchist, but bingo. Like, I think he touched on, I want to keep reading more, but he just touched on a huge mental roadblock, not just in the minds of the state, in the minds of everybody. Like, oh no, like if there's something superior other than maybe God, but then, Christians have the convenience of Romans 13 where they can say, well, you see, but God put the state in place. So, we gotta follow our leaders. I mean, it's how it is, like a lot of this going down these trains of thought calls into question authoritarianism across the board, which I think is kind of what you were hinting at there, Ellen, a little, or what part of what you were getting at earlier, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I was referencing that. And like, I understand why people would not want to address something that might call into question the sovereignty of the state. Uh-huh. Because then you have to face the cold, harsh realities of the universe.
Right.
That is not designed for us, but we were, sort of designed for this planet. But there's so much more of existence than what we are familiar with.
Right.
Including that great unknown that is out there. And so many people are uncomfortable with facing that sort of unknown. And, you know, like their imagination will run wild with what sort of dangers they face, including like these extraterrestrials. Most people just assume like they're here to suck our blood and take our brains or something.
Yeah.
They don't want our genetic material. We can't assume that. But most people do, because that's, you know, it's frightening to them to face that unknown. And it feels safe to like have that defensive position of like, oh, well, the great state will take care of me. There's a great military that will defend me.
Yeah.
But, you know, if there's a force that's even greater than that, then I guess you're just going to have to learn to live with that unknown quantity and adapt to it.
Sure.
And that's hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have things like the Brookings Report from the 60s, which was a government, you know, which came out of government funding to a think tank and was presented to the government, basically saying, okay, if we find, when we go to the moon or when we go XYZ, when we go wherever, and if we find evidence of extraterrestrial life, if we find evidence of extraterrestrial sapient life, how do we handle that? And the Brookings Report very clearly states, you don't tell anybody. Like you keep it quiet, because you don't know what this is going to upend civilization if you tell people. And they base that, admittedly. Like, it's not like what Alexander Went is saying here, it's not like there isn't precedent for it, because they base it on, okay, you know, like cargo cults, like for when, you know, just a quote unquote, and I put this in quotes, an advanced culture. Now that's relative. Okay.
Technologically
that's
advanced.
Subjective, I should say. Yeah. Let's say a technologically advanced culture shows up to a less advanced culture. It's disruptive. Generally, it's disruptive. Okay. And
yeah. Are you referencing like in World War II where supplies were dropped off to like remote islands?
Free food.
Yeah. And the people started building like statues of airplanes.
Yeah. Or like bamboo airplanes.
Yeah.
You know, hoping that it would bring back the free food. You know, yeah, that's the cargo cults. And so, you know, it's not like they're unjustified in thinking that that's what would happen. You know, and are people stupid? Well, you tell me. Can we get everybody to use DuckDuckGo and respect their own goddamn privacy? Nope, not even the scientists, right?
To be scientists.
Or would be scientists. Sure, yeah, or to be. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. So it's not like again that they don't have evidence that this would be a problem, you know. And what Alexander Went is saying, yeah, I don't doubt it. You know, that doesn't. Now again, we say that it's a problem. It being a problem is also relative. You know, is also subjective, because it might end up being a very good thing. You know, even if there is a brief period of some social upheaval and turmoil. But regardless, let me read a little bit more here. So the whole worldview of the modern state is very vulnerable to the UFO question. You can't even ask the question because it raises the possibility that there could be ETs here, and that would just blow everything wide open. Now, I want to be clear here, because before anybody thinks that I am worried about like my world changing in some great way, okay, because I am notorious for saying, no, I don't think I don't think ETs have ever been to this planet. And I don't think that they're responsible for the UAPs or the UFOs. I'm an anarchist. I think the state's completely unethical. So like in my mind, there's no roadblock. If people want to say, oh, Brian's got a roadblock, then it's why he doesn't think aliens are out there, or why he doesn't think ETs are out there. No.
If they are out there, please come.
Yeah, exactly.
Take us away.
Right. You know, I mean, that gets to a whole other thing too. None of this would really be a problem if people who, let's just say, people who do have their fucking act together. Okay. And I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound braggadocious in suggesting that.
Oh, yes, you do. Come on.
All right. I do. Yeah. So you and I have our act together. Okay? If we just had somewhere to go, you know, where like it's like in Aldous Huxley's, in Brave New World. Mm-hmm. Okay. At the end of the book, they offer the guy, they're like, okay, well, we've got this island for people like you. All right. We won't kill you. Okay. Just, you can't be here because you're going to fuck everything up. All right. But we've got this island where all the smart people go and you can just hang out there. You know what I mean? And like, well, can I just have my island? All right. Like, fine. If people want their safety net, they want their fucking nanny state, they want their religion and whatever. Okay. But can I just have somewhere to go? And that's the problem, is there's nowhere to go, like on Earth to get away from it. If there was just somewhere to go, okay. You know what I mean? Like, have all the fucking, I shouldn't say that because I care about people. I was going to say, have all the fucking power you want, have all the fucking tyranny you want, whatever, you do it over there, but just give me someplace that I can go to.
That's the same attitude of the ETs.
Ah.
Now you understand them.
Ah. Well.
See, let the virus destroy itself.
Woo. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. All right.
Yes, please. I love this story. It's such a good story.
Yeah, it is. It's a great conversation that it brings too. Sean Illing, that's an argument for why states might not be interested in this question, but it doesn't explain why non-state actors or the private sector isn't particularly eager to study this. Alexander Wendt, now that's a very good point. In our paper, we only dealt with states. What's interesting lately is that states seem more willing to engage with this than scientists. I think there's a hubris in the scientific community, a belief that human beings are the most intelligent species on the planet, and it's very hard to come to grips with the idea that if there are aliens here, they're obviously much smarter than we are.
Yeah.
I've received a lot of emails from individual scientists in response to my TEDx talk, and all of them said the same thing, which is, thank you. Quote, thank you. We wish we could study this, but we can't because our lives depend on getting grants from the government and other research institutes. And if anybody gets worried that we're interested in UFOs, boom, they won't get a cent and their careers will be in the tank, end quote. But I still think most scientists believe this is all nonsense anyway, and that's frankly disappointing. Ellen, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're being funded, I totally understand the fear of being discredited as a scientist if you study something that most people think is mythology.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that. But I think that, especially given this evidence that's being presented, supposedly from a reputable source, I think that, people should consider this. It's been part of our mythology for a long time. I mean, some of the most famous movies are alien movies,
Right.
And now we're having at least a few videos released, and that's not to say that there's a whole stockpile of these, I'm sure.
Right.
But if a government institution is saying that these things are real, then that lends credence, and I know it's still going to take some bravery on the part of the first scientists who decide to look at UFOlogy as a real field of study and not something that's like
laughed at.
Yeah, exactly.
Scorned.
It's not a joke. It's not scorned. It's going to take some bravery on the part of scientists, but that's the name of the game. That's what you have to do when you're going into a new field of study.
Yeah.
Is face a lot of criticism. But somebody's got to do it because this is a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you, this happens. It's not just science. The getting to the truth of anything is consistently held down by monetary incentives. Okay.
Yeah. And by public opinion.
Yep. And I want to, for example, okay, now I have gotten compliments from brilliant people that frankly work at major institutions, like institutions of learning and science, who have said, like, one of Sovryn Tech's strengths, and he was also referencing a YouTube channel, which I heartily recommend, by a guy named Isaac Arthur. That's the YouTube channel. This guy does tremendous work. Is that we're small enough to where we don't have to worry about getting shut down, or about, like, say, if we do have advertisers, those advertisers are also on the scale and understand exactly what we're about and won't hush us, won't shut us up. You get a podcast or a YouTube channel to a certain scale, and then you say something controversial, like Angry Video Game Nerd. If James were an anarchist, he's never going to tell you that. He's never going to say it, because you know what? The instant he does that, he's lucky if he's going to stay on YouTube, for one. And for two, he's lucky if he's going to keep any of those precious advertisers. because they're going to run to the hills the instant you lay out any kind of truth. All right. And so, and I know this, I've had this show. I mean, when you've been around almost 10 years, you get a lot of experience. I've had points where this show was perhaps not as controversial as a test phase. What kind of advertisers we can get? Oh, when the Golden Stallion's a little less controversial, it's hard to imagine, but when I'm a little less controversial, I get all kinds of advertisers. Oh, we'd love to be on your show. And oh shit, though, once he starts saying, oh, no, all right, could you lay off the anarchy a little bit? Could you not say that that such and such? Could you not talk about ancient civilizations? Could you not talk about this? As soon as you start doing that, oh man, they're just not interested.
Oh, we'll just drop them like a hot potato.
Right.
I mean, you've got to be able to have the freedom to say what you want to say.
Well, absolutely. But that's the thing, is that this happens in science. It happens literally across the board. And as long, and this is, boy, you want to talk about controversial, you want to talk about where I'm going to lose listeners, as long as there are monetary incentives involved at a large scale, right? We're never going to get to any truth of anything. We're just not.
And this has been a problem forever. I mean, scientists have struggled so much to get money and funding for research into things that are genuinely of interest.
Yeah.
And I mean, now is a great time to be working in immunology or something like that, because there's tons of funding going into like finding a vaccine for COVID-19.
Right.
But all the other scientists who are working on maybe like, space telescopes or like deep sea exploration, they're shit out of luck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I have the answer, and you can tell me what you think of this, Ellen. I mean, I think, or I have the solution, I should say, is that, I mean, a lot of, and I've had personal friends who they're running insane laboratories out of their apartments. They're little shitty ass apartments. Okay. And
good for them.
I don't mean that as an insult to them. And they are working on the hardest problems in the world. I mean, we're talking like immortality, all kinds of things. These people are serious. All right. They're absolutely serious. These aren't, what anyone would ever call a wacko of any type, or nut job or anything like that. But where they run into roadblocks, so you can get open source laboratory tools and all kinds of other shit, in your room and whatever. Now, I mean, is that legal? Well, that's something. But then if nobody knows, nobody knows. The real issue that they run into is they can't get access to previous research. All of that's behind paywalls, whatever other, I mean, because, scientific papers aren't just available for everybody to read. They damn well should be. Yeah, right. You do. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as a student, currently, I have the privilege of having access to amazing databases.
Right.
But some of these papers are hundreds of dollars each just to get access for 24 hours.
Exactly. And that now, so we can start to get past the monetary incentives. Okay. And do science in our homes. Right. But then, for a lot of us, we'd have to start from square one. We'd have to start from zero because we can't get access to a lot of the previous research, or even research that is highly relevant to what we would want to do, to what we're researching. And so if you eat, I mean, one of the ways to solve this, okay, fine. You don't want to talk about the money thing. One of the ways to solve this is open up the fucking information that shouldn't be closed in the first place. And of course, if you do that, hello, Aaron Schwartz, right? I mean, you're going to get the system coming down on you because they know exactly, the problem or the solutions that it brings for everyone and the problems it brings for the state or for the institutions attached thereof. So, I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that all that should be opened up?
Yeah, of course. I think that all of that information should be free and publicly available.
Sure.
Especially scientific papers. Those are the basis for the knowledge of and understanding of our modern civilization, technology, medicine, anything that has benefited us in any way over the past, 100 years, 200 years.
Yeah.
Is all in those scientific papers. And like to keep that from people is just a crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And money has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, on that end, right. No, you're totally right. I mean, that's all about control. And, well, anyway. Read on?
Yes.
So, Sean Illing, I think there are other explanations here, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about these Navy videos. What do you think you're seeing when you watch these? Alexander Wendt. The first thing I'd say is that it doesn't matter what I think because I'm not a scientist, right? I don't know what's on those videos. But to me, I listen to the pilots, to their voices, and I trust them much more than I would trust myself. And they're clearly seeing something extraordinary. Now, whether it's alien life, who knows? It's a plausible explanation. My point is that we should be agnostic about this and simply study it scientifically. Let's do the science, and then we can talk about what we found. Until we've done that, it's all bullshit.
Yes.
I completely agree. Sean Illing, is it possible that there is no real taboo and that the lack of rigorous study has more to do with the limits of the field or the paucity of evidence than anything else? Alexander Wendt, well, it's true that the evidence we have is very vague. Most of it is anecdotal. It's not scientific. A lot of it is eyewitness reports. On the other hand, the evidence has been going on for many decades. It's very consistent in many ways. It's all over the world. There's a huge number of cases, and there is physical evidence in the form of videos or radar accounts. And when that evidence comes from the U.S. Navy, it's safe to say that it's legit and not doctored. Sean Illing, but what would a science of UFOs even look like? How do we study empirically something for which there's so little empirical evidence? Alexander Wendt, like Elizabeth Warren says, I have a plan for that. Okay. Anyway, Sean Illing, great. Let's hear it. Alexander Wendt, about 5 years ago, some colleagues of mine and I formed a nonprofit called UFO Data. And the objective we set for the nonprofit was to create a ground-based network of surveillance stations that would monitor the sky 24/7 with cameras and various other technologies looking for UFOs. Anything comes along, boom, the camera starts snapping pictures or radar or film until the UFO passes. The technology is very sophisticated now and very cheap. Sean Illing, I don't quite understand the need for that. There are thousands of satellites and radar systems operating all over the world at every moment, surveilling and recording and tracking. An obvious question is, why are there not more sightings? Why is there not more evidence? Why are there so few compelling pieces of evidence? Alexander Wendt, I think part of the problem is that a lot of the parameters of these technologies that we use to look for asteroids and meteors and all these other things are such that UFOs may not be within those parameters. And so they'll just be discarded as noise or unnoticeable junk. So that's one explanation for why we see less than we might. Now I'll break in on that quick. Yeah, absolutely. Just like SETI, right? Which is actually looking for alien life. It's only covering the smallest of percentages of areas to look for, what they would consider evidence of extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, and to his point, like SETI, that's only listening for reception of some sort of electromagnetic waves.
Right.
It's not taking pictures.
No, we don't have a bunch of tricorders out there that are picking up every little signal, that's not how this works.
And it's also listening like many, many light years away, not within the Earth's atmosphere.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind of what he means when he's talking about parameters.
Yeah. So I think he's got a point there that, okay, well, we might not see it because
we're not looking specifically in that area.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Like humans are so terrible with that. When you're looking for something and it's in a place that's noticeable, but you don't expect it to be there. I'm looking for
see it.
I'm just looking for my glasses everywhere. It's in some place that I don't normally put it, but it's still in plain sight. But it's going to take me 10 minutes to find them.
No, it's a great analogy. Like where are your keys? They might be in your hand, but if you're not paying attention to the senses of holding your keys,
exactly,
you don't know, even though they're right there, like it's obvious. And even when you're searching, if you don't pay attention to those senses, or in this case, those parameters, you miss it.
So I think it's so important for humans to acknowledge, yes, we have major blind spots.
Right.
And we also are very limited in what we can pay attention to at any one point in time. And also, we don't see things unless we're specifically looking for it.
Absolutely. So let's go to the next. Secondly, no one has bothered to actually look for UFOs. We're looking for ETs around distant stars. We're looking for comets. We're looking at all kinds of other things in the atmosphere. No one, as far as I know, is seriously looking for UFOs. But to me, it doesn't really matter why we don't see more. What matters is these 3 videos that the Navy released. I agree. I defy anyone to watch those and come away thinking there's nothing there worth investigating. Those pilots who spent thousands of hours in the sky, who are flying the most sophisticated machines in the entire world, are seeing something that they have never seen before and are completely blown away by it. Again, these are videos released by the Navy, and so I'm inclined to believe what I'm seeing. What's striking is that the objects don't behave like natural phenomena. One of the objects rotates as it's flying against the wind, which is not normal, and the pilots are clearly under the impression that these objects are under intelligent control. Sean Illing, are you persuaded at all by some of the non-ET explanations? For instance, that some of the UFOs are actually weather balloons or drones or shadow of aircraft above, and and that what appear to be advanced maneuvers are really just a product of infrared glare or camera angles or eyewitness errors. Alexander Wendt, I think the majority of UFO reports probably have conventional explanations like that, and they're just misidentifications by observers on the ground. That's probably the majority of cases. So it's really the hardcore minority cases that don't have those kinds of obvious explanations. And that's where we have better physical evidence or authoritative sources like the military. And it's really easy to throw out skeptical possibilities, but I look at those videos and they don't look fake to me at all. Sean Illing says, no, they don't. Stallion breaking in, I watched these. I talked about them on the show previously, and I second that. There's something there. Like, I don't think that those look fake at all. And I want to reiterate what Wendt is saying here, in that, these pilots are trained to not see, to cut through the bullshit in the air. If you are prone to seeing shit while you're flying, you are dead. That's it. That is, there's a reason most people can't be jet fighter pilots. It's because it takes a special amount of training and a special someone that can even handle that training. And that's why I also give these a lot of credence, even though, fuck the military and anti-war and the whole thing. Okay. But that's irregardless, or that's not a word. That's regardless of, the evidence that we're presented with here. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ellen, or do you want me to move on?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's making a huge assumption saying that these videos are legitimate because they come from a military organization, but it's one that I think we can reasonably make.
Yeah.
You know, because it would take, I guess, just according to Occam's razors, the simplest explanation that these are real and that we can trust them from the military. Mm-hmm. Like, you'd have to like construct this whole conspiracy theory about how they're being fake so that they can control this and this. So, I think they're real. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you watch the videos and hear what the pilots are saying, they are in awe. And, what they're seeing is very real to them.
Right. So Sean Illing continues, tell me the truth. You think it's aliens, right? Alexander Wendt, I think so. If I were placing a bet, I guess I would say 51-49 in favor of ETs. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if the opposite were true. Again, we haven't done the science. Sean Illing, that's a big number, Alex. Alexander Wendt, it is. Sean Illing, to say that something is hard to explain is not to say that it's inexplicable, though. It's entirely possible, likely even, that there's a simple account of these encounters and we just don't have it yet. What's the Occam's razor explanation for these UFO sightings? Alexander Wendt, to me, the Occam's razor explanation is ETs, which is exactly your point, Ellen. Right on.
That's kind of surprising to me because I would think the Occam's razor explanation would be it's an alternative government project. There's some other government in the world
that's what I run with.
That is building aircraft that can do these weird things.
Right.
But then again, there are other things like the aircraft flying at 90-degree angles, going really fast and not slowing down, seemingly defying the laws of our known physics. Mm-hmm. I don't know that you can explain that using the alternative government hypothesis.
Yeah, that's where I think people want to bring in the ETs, is because they're breaking at certain points. These things break the laws of physics, say, maybe not as much the ones from the 3 Navy videos, but still. Yeah, I mean, and I talked about it when I last covered the story, that, that's where I sit, is that they're just advanced government planes. I think actually every UFO is basically that. I mean, I could get into some further flights of fancy, but it wouldn't go to ETs, but we'll talk about that. So let's see. Let's keep reading here. Alexander Wendt, it explains all the cases just like that. And you don't need a whole bunch of different theories or assumptions for all these different phenomena, right? Because the phenomena are different. But I guess I don't see a competing explanation of any kind that would explain some of the stuff that we either have on film or the pilots have seen. And again, why didn't the military come up with these alternative explanations? They must have thought about them and concluded it doesn't fit the data. Now, that's a great point for him to bring up as well. Like, and because granted, there have been plenty of times throughout the years where the military has done that. Oh, it's a weather balloon. Oh, is this, you think Roswell, you think these other things.
Sure.
And the military is very quick to come up with an alternative explanation. But I guess this time they're not so quick. And that's part of what's adding to the validity of these videos.
Yeah, it really does lend credence to that, especially considering like the Navy has to come up with new protocols now to look
Mm-hmm.
out for these sorts of things because it genuinely does pose a threat to the pilots.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a point I brought up again before, is that these pilots are trained. If you don't just talk about bullshit. If you're going to report something in, boy, it better be something, it better be legit, like it better be very real. Nobody has time and nobody is interested on official records of, a fly smacking you in the face. I mean, not that it'd be a fly, but you get my point. Yeah. That it just adds to it. Let's keep reading. Sean Illing, I'm not sure that's right. They may have a strong hunch, but simply can't prove it. So it remains officially unidentified. We can definitely say that the chances that aliens are involved is non-zero, but beyond that, I have no idea. Alexander Wendt, that's pretty close to my position. Sean Illing, but a weather balloon or malfunctioning radar systems or just eyewitness mistakes seems like much simpler explanations. Alexander Wendt, but you'd have to explain why multiple instruments were all malfunctioning in the same way at the same time. You've got multiple jets up there. You've got radar on the ships down below tracking at the same time. You've got communications going on with the people on the ships and the planes, the guys in the planes. So whatever explanations people do offer, they've got to fit the data. It doesn't look like that was a weather balloon that those guys were seeing. I assume professional fighter pilots are pretty good at spotting and recognizing weather balloons, and surely that's a common occurrence. It's easy to be a skeptic here. I get that. All I'm saying is that there's enough here to justify the science. The puzzle is that we're not doing the science. To me, that's the essential phenomenon that's of interest. Sean Illing, why would scientists care about UFOs? Why should philosophers care? Why should anyone care? Alexander Wendt, because if ETs were discovered, it would be the most important event in human history. Sean Illing, why? Alexander Wendt, it is because if it became known, it could be a very dangerous event in the sense that we might see a collapse of state authority. Woo.
Yeah.
We might see chaos. The possibility of contact with a civilization that has vastly more knowledge than we do is exciting and terrifying and unpredictable. Sean Illing, I mean, isn't that a case for putting our heads down and minding our own fucking business? Stephen Hawking famously warned humanity about the perils of first contact with an alien species. Quote, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be such as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans.
No, it did not.
Was he wrong? Let me read Alexander Wendt, then I want to get your thoughts on this. My feeling is that if they're here, they're almost certainly peaceful, because if they were not peaceful, they would have wiped us out a long time ago. They can probably do it very quickly. So my assumption is they don't mean any harm, but it's still the case that society could implode or destabilize as a result of colliding with ETs.
So that is a really good point, because humans have done plenty of things. I think, like, if this alien or extraterrestrial species thought that humans were impeding on their planet in some way, they could have easily killed us at any point in history.
Right.
But they chose not to. Even now, they're not wiping us out.
Yeah, it's a fair point, but I don't know.
So they must be playing some other game. Either they don't want to interfere because they know that it'll destabilize our culture and they want to be introduced to us in a friendly way, or there's something else, some larger plan. But it certainly is not enslave humanity, because they could have done that already.
Yeah. I want to keep reading. I hear you. Something about that still, well, anyway, let me read Sean Illing here. And I think you're raising a great point. I think Alexander Wendt is raising a great point that they could have already. But let me read what Sean Illing says. That's a big assumption. If they are here, they might be peaceful, sure, but they might also be on an ongoing or on a scouting operation. They might be looking for holes in our defenses, weaknesses in our societies, and in our physical bodies. The point, obviously, is that we have no freaking idea. So maybe that's the case for following Hawking's lead here, right? Maybe it's best to not go poking about for superior life. Alexander Wendt says, I've thought about this and I worry less about poking around and getting conquered and more about the potential realization that these things are here and then an internal implosion of our society. So I worry more about my fellow human beings more than I worry about the aliens. So I guess in that sense, I disagree with Hawking's premise that they're out to get us. But sure, it's possible they're on a surveillance mission. But people have been reporting UFOs for at least 80 years, and that's a really, really long surveillance mission. And also, why would they want to conquer us? That's like conquering ants. Sean Illing, if some of these UFOs are the products of alien life, why haven't they made their presence more explicit? If they wanted to remain undetected, they could, and yet they continually expose themselves in these semi-clandestine ways. Why? Alexander Wendt, that's a very good question because you're right. I think if they wanted to be completely secretive, they could. If they wanted to come out in the open, they could do that too. My guess is that they have had a lot of experience with this in the past with civilizations at our stage, and they probably know that if they land on the White House lawn, there will be chaos and social breakdown. People will start shooting at them. So I think that what they're doing is trying to get us used to the idea that they're here with the hopes that we'll figure it out ourselves, that we'll go beyond the taboo and do the science, and then maybe we can absorb the knowledge that we're not alone and our society won't implode when we finally do have contact. That's my theory. Who knows, right? Sean Billing, it's an interesting theory and as likely as any other, but Hawking's theory is every bit as plausible. Okay, I'm going to go one more with Alexander Wendt. That's right, but people have speculated that any civilization that's able to travel between the stars would have to become nonviolent because they would never survive long enough if they're violent among themselves to actually reach a point where their technology was that sophisticated. And human beings don't seem to be as violent as we used to be. So there's that. Okay, wait, no, I got to give Sean Illing. And I'd say our institutions have evolved, or I'd say our institutions have evolved and the incentives guiding our behavior have evolved, but I don't think we have. I think human beings are as nonviolent as their circumstances allow them to be. Alexander Wendt, that's fair. So here's the thing. A lot of that is assumption. Like Sean Illing is right on that a lot of that are assumptions. There was a movie that was supposed to get made about Gene Roddenberry that was basically about him making Star Trek. But in the movie, now I don't think this movie ever got made. But in the movie, the idea was that he's making Star Trek based on what aliens told him to do because he has to get people ready. It's predictive programming. He has to get humanity ready for them coming. And that was the entire purpose of Star Trek.
Oh, that would be a wonderful movie.
Right.
It'd be really meta.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'd be very interesting. And actually, something I talked about, was it on the last episode of Sovereign Tech? No, it was the second to last episode of Sovereign Tech, where I talk about Gene Roddenberry's Last Conversation, that book. In that, Gene Roddenberry basically admits he doesn't think he's human. He says he's in a human body, but he doesn't think he's human.
Yeah, that's pretty strange.
Yeah, I mean, that's striking. And folks, if you don't believe me, go fucking read it for yourself because some asshole happened to post the book, which isn't available as an ebook anywhere. It doesn't matter where you go, even on torrent sites, it's not there. It's so weird, but somebody in the Sovereign Tech Telegram group put that book there. They got it professionally scanned. They paid for it to get done, the whole thing, and they just dropped it off. And I can't believe that. What a jerk. So anyway, I get these theories. I really do. I mean, also, the other part is that, say it's extraterrestrials, and they came to Earth, and they find this species that, say, is inferior, whatever that means. That can change a person's mind. I mean, one only have to look at, actually, here's an analogy that Alexander Wendt didn't decide to go down. Captain Cook. Okay, not Robin Cook, Captain Cook. Captain Cook, when he got to his islands, he very quickly began to think, these are my islands. I am the king of the fucking sea. I am the king of the ocean. And he started, even though at first he's telling his fellow crewmen of the Resolution, you're going to treat these people with respect. You're going to, when he gets to Tahiti or, wherever else, I mean, to all these islands, he's like, you're going to treat them with respect. You're going to blah, blah, blah. Eventually he starts buying into his own bullshit. And I can only imagine, I'm sure he took advantage of the situation. And it seems pretty clear even in his logs. Like, yeah, he felt like he was, he had himself a white savior complex. And this would be the ET savior complex, and that leads to, I think, all kinds of problems. So even if they came here and they were originally nonviolent, once they realize that, we're superior, we're this and that, I don't know. And then you get into like, okay, let's say they've been here for a very long time. Then you can't help but get into like Genesis 6:4, what if, out of the Bible. Now, I don't think, well, I'm going.
And what if they're not subject to the same failings that humans are?
Well, that's fair. That's a good counterpoint to
They're
bring
an
up.
entirely different species.
Yeah. What I was going to talk about is the verse of, where the sons of God went into the daughters of men. You know, is that talking about like these advanced aliens suddenly saying, "Wow, these human women, not bad, not bad," and they changed their mind. You know, but you're right. I mean, that's fair to say. Is that why would they act like Captain Cook? You know, because they're not human. So what would be the example of that? But I feel like I don't know. I feel like a lot of what Alexander Wendt is suggesting is also, I mean, because then you could use that against that same logic, Ellen. It's a great counterpoint, but that could be used against the nonviolent thing. We don't know how the species operates. You know, like maybe they can get to faster than light travel or something and be the fucking Klingons.
Okay, well, that's true. But if we can't make any assumptions, then don't.
Aha. No, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
We can't draw any conclusions based off of video footage.
Right.
So let's not assume anything.
Right. Fair. Okay. Well, let's read on. See what Sean Illing is assuming here.
All right.
There's not much more to go. But, okay. So if there's a non-zero chance that aliens are real and they know we're here, it's crazy that governments aren't more concerned about the dangers. We've all seen the same movies. How do you explain the apparent difference here? Alexander Wendt, for governments, there's no real upside to talking about this. They can't control this. If there are ETs, they don't have the power to do anything about it. If they're helpless in the face of they're helpless in the face of ETs. And there's a big downside risk of social chaos, loss of authority, loss of control, and all that. So I think governments have lots of reasons to let a sleeping dog lie, which is why the Navy's thing is so surprising in a way. Sean Illing, maybe several governments already know of ETs and aren't revealing that knowledge for all the reasons you suggest. Alexander Wendt, I'm a strong disbeliever in any kind of conspiracy argument. I don't think there has ever been a conspiracy to cover up the truth that we know that aliens are here. At most, we've covered up the fact that we have no idea what's going on. I'll break in for a second on that. I already brought up the Brookings report, which that's not conspiracy. That's totally legitimate. And the government position, or their best position, was that, no, we don't tell people. And that's what Sean Illing was suggesting. It's like, well, yeah, you know, like that's basically what the government said that they do.
Yeah, and I mean, you can bring into this like the doctored NASA photos of the moon or Phobos or something. Sure. But that's, I don't know that there's enough evidence to say that those are real occurrences. But if they are covering up something, it's because they can't explain it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
you know?
Maybe it's just they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
They themselves. And your point about let's not make any assumptions. Like, I mean, yeah, like that's how we should look at this. We don't know. We don't know what to do with this. And it's like, you're basically saying it might not be nefarious. It might just be simply, look, we don't know what to do. And so why like let it out, you know? I mean, and I can, to some degree, I can respect that. I don't respect governments at all or authoritarianism at all, but there are things that go through my head that I don't have enough evidence to back my position on. And so I keep my mouth shut to most people, you know? And so like, I can kind of understand that perspective, right? Okay. We don't have enough evidence. So why tell people about it? I mean, cause I have some wild shit that runs through my head. Right. And of course you, Ellen, more than anybody, you know, knows.
I get to hear about it.
You get to hear it. It's, you know, but I don't say it on the show because I don't have enough to back it up.
But the thing is, I think it's fine to develop theories.
Yep.
You know, plausible theories, but that doesn't mean that you have to assume that they're true. It's possible that you could have multiple running theories about the same thing at the same time.
That's true. Yeah, concurrent theories. Yeah.
And people love making theories. That's what we're built to do. We are, you know, our brains are like predictive computers.
Right.
We like to know what we're getting into.
We like pattern recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for sure.
But there's no reason that we need to say that any of our theories are, you know, true or what we expect. It's just it could make it easier for us to integrate knowledge if one of our theories did turn out to be true.
And also, there's no reason for there to just be one reason. Like, I mean, that's a failing that happens with a lot of this. So why are they here? And it's like, well, I could give you one reason, you know, even if you knew exactly if they're here and why they're here. There'd still be a multitude of reasons. Like, why would it just be one, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Like, we didn't go to the moon for one reason. There are a bunch of reasons.
We just went to the moon to plant the flag.
Yeah, we just went there to play golf. Oh, okay, right.
We went there to test Newton's theories.
Yeah. Like, no, there is a bunch of... In fact, there are reasons that we went there with trying to find new reasons to go there, right? That's like the old Cisco quote. It's like, we don't just go looking for answers to questions. We go looking for new questions.
Yes.
And a lot of the things we do is like, well, why'd you do it? It's like, well, I had this reason, but I think along the way I might discover some others. And that's part of the point.
And for as much as I respect Stephen Hawking,
yeah,
I think that quote that he made about keeping your head down and minding your own business is such a shame.
Yeah.
Really, like, if there is another species out there that's more intelligent, we can't ignore it.
Right.
Like, we have to acknowledge it and learn as much as we can about it, regardless of whether it's violent or it has good intentions.
Right, because you can't ignore the consequences of its existence.
Exactly. You're going to have to confront it at some point.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so let's go with Sean Illing some more. What's the argument or the piece of evidence that gives you the most pause? What makes you think there's nothing here? Alexander Went says, that's a good question. That I don't have a good answer shows my bias in a way. I guess I'd like to see more videos of the sort the Navy just released. It's likely they have other videos they haven't released. So I guess I would like to see more physical evidence. I suppose that's my answer. The thing that gives me the most pause is that we have so little evidence. Sean Illing, you said a minute ago that we might be in a pre-contact situation in which ETs are gradually acclimating us to their presence. If that's true, what should we be doing to prepare for whatever comes next? Alexander Went, actually, that's the next article I would like to write. I don't know what the answer is right now. I only write articles where I don't know the answer ahead of time. But I guess I will say this. Montezuma could have prepared a lot better for Cortez than he did had he only known Cortez was coming.
Yeah. Fucking right.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I mean, I think that last question that Sean Illing puts out is a good one for two reasons, or there's more than one question. What do you do to prepare? What brings you pause? What brings you pause is trying to falsify your claims or your beliefs. And that is absolutely essential. And that does not get enough. That doesn't get done enough in any ology of any stripe. It just doesn't. Nobody tries to really falsify their beliefs well enough. I mean, I know, testing your hypothesis is supposed to be part of the scientific process, but it doesn't always happen. And the other part of what to do to prepare, I would definitely like to talk about that. But this is a brilliant conversation that got laid out here.
Definitely.
And a lot of great ideas that get brought up. I will say personally, I'm disappointed that the crypto-terrestrial possibility, or even the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, or the interdimensional hypothesis, that none of those entered the fray. They stuck almost explicitly with ETs.
Well, the funny thing is, it does show their background assumption that the ETs came from far away.
Right.
It's possible that they just never considered that they could have been from this very planet. But I mean, he did mention it earlier in the conversation that, like, if they did evolve on this planet, they might see the planet as theirs, not ours.
Yeah. Or if they've been here for a long time before, again, humans were on the stage, that it's their planet and not ours. And I thought that was maybe the biggest thing to pull out of this, was that, like, oh shit, and what if this isn't ours? And of course, you raised the great counterpoint of we should never think of it as ours anyway, but or as property anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly not property. I mean, you can't own life. You can't control nature. It's
right.
By definition out of control.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even when you lay down sidewalk, there's still blades of grass and dandelions that spring up in the cracks. Like, that's going to happen anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's other hypotheses here that weren't discussed. The idea of it being like for other governments. I mean, you could take that a step further. And I mean, there's people who talk about this who I think are off their rocker, but they espouse this idea perhaps more readily than anyone else, and that's of breakaway civilizations. That being that, actually we've had, or governments, modern governments have had wildly advanced technologies for very long, for at least a few decades, and in fact they've already, like, this gets into I keep forgetting his name. That's terrible, but the guy from Britain who cracked into DoD servers in the early aughts. And he found listings for all these ships, for all these Navy ships, speaking of the Navy. And it's not McDermott, it's something like that. Anyway, and he's like, wait, but these ships aren't on Earth. What the fuck what's this list of ships? And his conclusion, and the evidence seems to suggest, these are ships in outer space. Like the USS whatever sounds like something, something from Starfleet, right? McKinnon maybe is his name. Anyway, doesn't matter. So, the idea that, these things are, still human made, but it's from like this breakaway civilization that's, doing their business on Mars and on the moon and wherever else. That's an interesting route to go. But again, unfortunately, we don't get to explore any of this because it always gets laughed off. And I agree with the overall sentiment of the article. It's time to stop laughing it off. We don't have to instantly run to thinking ETs.
Not little green men.
No, right. But let's start considering the insane, or what would previously be seen as the insane. Let's start, considering the fantastical.
Yeah. And this is really exciting because in any field of science, this is how the new field is born.
Right.
People used to think that it was insane to be inoculated with like pus from someone's infected wound, but that's how vaccines began.
Yes.
And now everybody gets vaccinated. Well, not everybody, I shouldn't say that, but a large percentage of the population gets vaccinated almost every year, if not every 7 years or something. So it always starts out like that, with lots of ridicule and people thinking this is madness, this is black magic, something like we just should not go here. But no, it's really getting lots of credence, and I think over time there will be like momentum picked up by people making discoveries or putting forth theories or something like that. There will be literature published, and more people will feel comfortable actually addressing what used to be a taboo subject.
Right. Well, even just in conventional history, science itself came out of alchemy. Okay. And if, we can say, or conventionally people will say that what the alchemists, were coming up with and what they were trying to develop, a lot of that was horseshit, but in exploring that horseshit, you ended up finding some
sometimes literal horseshit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes, right, exactly. But you ended up finding, worthy nuggets in that cow pie. And, and science
not gold
was born.
nuggets.
But this is the part that people miss. It took exploring the craziness. It took, did John Dee really talk to angels or no? It took trying to prove these insane ideas. Okay. And then disproving them. That's when, because or for example, during the Enlightenment. Okay. And even parts of the Renaissance, they were trying, the first scientists, what they were trying to do was prove God, right? God. They were trying to prove the Sky Daddy. I shouldn't say God. They were trying to prove the Sky Daddy. And in so doing, they're like, wait a minute, there is no Sky Daddy. But if you don't try, if you don't even try to disprove it in the first place, if you don't take it seriously for a minute and then try and disprove it, you never get to where we are now. You never get to developing science itself. And so I think Alexander Wyatt is totally on for saying, no, we got to take it seriously. We got to be allowed to ask these questions. We got to be allowed to explore it. Now, the problem is, much like Bitcoin has done with the US dollar, you start exploring that, you start taking seriously, whether you prove that they never existed or what. You start taking seriously the notion that, there might be a superior or advanced or technologically advanced species out there that are something beyond human. And the cards are going to fall away. Suddenly you're going to see, the curtain gets pulled away. There is the wizard, and it is an ugly old man. And holy shit, why were we ever listening to him in the first place? Because where does his authority come from? And you have no idea. And then the state, religion, all kinds of things, suddenly, boom, fall away.
And I think that would be a beautiful thing. I think it's really exciting, too, in the fact that once people begin to realize that there might be another intelligence out there besides our own, maybe it'll cause them to behave differently.
Sure.
Maybe they'll start being more respectful to the planet, to each other. And they'll start considering long-term implications of our decisions today.
Yeah, I would hope that would happen.
Yeah, that's the hope for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and I hate the word hope, but I would hope that happened. That would happen. My only concern is for humans. I don't know that it would. For example.
Well, it's certainly a test, an evolutionary test, I should say. And are we going to evolve to the next level?
Absolutely.
Or are we going to die off?
Yeah. I mean, because you know what's really sad? We can look back, again, even just with conventional history, we can look back and see the absolute barbarism that we engaged in as a species overall. Okay. And it infected the entire fucking species. You know, we can look back a couple thousand years, however long ago, and yet we can even say to ourselves, we can let the words escape from our lips. Those barbarians killing so many people, raping women, doing all these other things, whatever. Okay. Going down the list of it. But then you know, in action, how little we've changed. So, I mean, we can even look at past examples and we're still not inspired to say, I am not going to be like that. I am not going to be like those barbarians. I am going to be something better. And even that's not enough. It's not enough to change. I mean, for fuck's sake, you can't look at the Nazis in World War II and walk away from that saying, we will, you know, and walk away as the Jews did, saying never again, right? Or like the everyday person can't say to themselves, I'll never fall for that. We'll never be like that again. That'll never happen. No, but then son of a bitch in Richmond, you know, or wherever in the world, we've got Nazis running around again. How the hell is that possible? You know? And so that's the problem, is that it seems very rare that humans really learn, even when they are confronted with absolute evidence of where they are wrong. And you know, they just move on. And I don't want to be that depressing.
Well, maybe there's a certain strain of humans that are just not meant for intergalactic existence.
Ooh, ouch.
I mean, they can stay on the Earth's crust and be barbarians all they want.
Well, see, that gets them. Okay.
But if you cannot learn from stories, from history, how behaviors of certain kinds lead to really bad outcomes, and how certain things are actually more beneficial, instead of having to go through that personally for years before learning that lesson, then I don't know, you're just going to spend your entire life learning things all over again that you could have learned from reading?
See, but you're hitting at what I was saying earlier, is that this is the problem. Is that fine? If there are people who want to dig their heads in the sand, okay, even like Stephen Hawking, you know, that they want to burrow and just go through their lives and just keep acting how they're acting, whatever. Okay. Like that's the nature of freedom, baby. You live how you want to live, right? But then there's nowhere for us to go. Like there's nowhere for the people who are like, okay, no, we'd like to go explore the stars. That'd be fine. There's nowhere for us to go. Like we can't. And yeah, I mean, we can live in the cracks, like I've said many times on this show, you know?
It seems to be the only option.
Right. That's why I keep talking about it.
For now.
Yeah, but that's, you know, at the same time, that's fairly depressing, you know? But I think this article is raising a great point, that even when you are confronted with these videos that have as much credence and validity as anything of this type could have, they are being basically ignored by, you know, the institutions that have the tools and power to perhaps do something about it, for lack of a better phrase. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that, or what do you think is in these videos? I mean, do you have any theories? Like, I know you said your Occam's razor was that it's other government craft, right?
I think that's likely. I also think it's likely that there's another species on Earth that co-evolved here. I also think it's likely that there's just an extraterrestrial race that is set up a sort of base here. It could be any one of those things. I don't know that I believe so much in like the alternative plane of existence theory.
Yeah.
That one is just hard to wrap my head around. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that it's not likely. Regardless, I don't really know what the point of theorizing about their origins is. I mean, if we wanted to know that, we should ask them,
right.
You know?
Right.
It's kind of pointless for us to guess as to where they come from. But they're here and they're unknown to us. And I think that it definitely is worthwhile to try and figure out what's going on.
Sure.
And if it's another government, then we'll probably never know. But if it really genuinely is another intelligence, besides human, then I imagine someday when they judge that we are ready, that they will introduce themselves.
Yeah. Thinking about this and what you just said, like I am a major proponent on this show of discussing that, Homo sapiens sapiens is a really terrible umbrella. And that we don't explore enough, that there are probably, tens, maybe even hundreds, who knows, of subspecies of what would be considered Homo sapiens sapiens or Homo sapiens, wherever you want to go with that. And that there are those that are just different, kind of like we were talking about, and maybe there's enough of them within a certain category that, well, shit, like this is a subspecies, or this is another species, or whatever.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this while you were talking about it. Like, we don't have a place to go, but imagine if there was a place for people like that to go, that were different, that felt that they just needed to be away from regular humans, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Then they
Xavier
go
School for Gifted Children.
They form their own nation, whatever. They go to this isolated place.
Uh-huh.
That's like forming a new species. That's like giving birth to a new culture. And I think the rest of the world as it is now would not tolerate that, because they would look at us and say, "Oh, you think you're better than us," and then wage war or something, because they can't stand the idea of the different.
Right.
And so a group of people that have this ultimate power that they don't seem to have.
Yeah, or whatever it is.
The power over their own minds and their instincts and abilities.
Yeah. I mean, this gets into, there's a book, and there's actually quite a few books that cover this kind of thing. It's a book review that you can find in the podcast feed somewhere. It's from a couple of years ago, at least, where I reviewed Nick Redfern's Bloodline of the Gods. His theory is that, aliens or ETs did come here a long time ago. They are preparing humanity for something. And in fact, there are, like, he gets into type O negative blood, that's actually an alien, that's a extraterrestrial species, or like that's a mixture of Cro-Magnon and I'll just say alien DNA for the simplicity of the matter. And there's a couple other books out there where they think that it's ultimately going to end in a race war. Now, I don't mean blacks versus whites. I mean, ET infused humans and everyday humans. And
well, it wouldn't be the ET humans that are starting the war.
Well, I mean,
at least I would hope, if you're that advanced.
Peaceful. So because then there's other work, like there's a guy, Brad Steger, who wrote quite a few books on the matter. I'm not going to say they're the most scientifically rigorous books I've ever read in my life, but he wrote a book called The Star People, and actually wrote an entire series, Gods of Aquarius, Star People, Starborn. There's a bunch of them. And he gets into that, I mean, kind of the same idea. And he actually argued that Philip K. Dick believed this, that Philip K. Dick thought he wasn't human either, and that he had this like Star People DNA inside of him. Now that's his claim, and arguably Philip K. Dick, his argument is that Philip K. Dick put it into one of his novels after the fact. I don't know where to go with that. Okay, but Brad Steger's argument is that actually the Star People, or the Star Seed, as he would call them, are here to improve humanity, not to go to war with them, but to actually improve them. But I think even he, maybe like in Starborn, I think even he would recognize that there's going to be an apocalypse, because basically what the Star Seed are presenting to the Earth, this new way of life, very peaceful one, very positive one, it sounds like, is a threat to domination structures, and to the old order, as it were. And that you're going to have a time of, you're basically going to have what he uses biblical terms. You're going to have an age of apocalypse. And because the old order is not going to let this fly without a fight, and that's going to happen, and that you survive it. And I guess that gets into, now I'm just telling you what's out there, folks. That's all I'm doing here. Okay. I mean, it was kind of weird that it said that you have a rare blood, like, how do you know you're a star seed? You have a rare blood type, your body temperature is lower than normal. And I'm listening to that, I'm like, oh, oh. And there's a few other things, sensitivity to light and some other stuff like, oh. Anyway.
So you did read to me a questionnaire that was supposed to help you determine if you're a starseed or not. And some of these questions were pretty strange. It's like, do you have an affinity towards like hummingbirds or willow trees?
Oh, they're very weird.
Flowers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have something you want to go with that, or were you just bringing it up?
Well, I'm just saying, like, some of these criteria for whether or not you're a starseed, I think they're kind of strange, and it almost feels like astrology in that like it could fit a lot of different people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like his books, again, not scientifically rigorous. I didn't feel, but I don't know if PKD, Philip K. Dick thought he was an alien. I wouldn't be surprised.
Gene Roddenberry did.
Gene Roddenberry thought he was, or he thought he was something else. He thought he was not human. Whatever the hell that means. But anyway, getting into how do you survive this potential truth or this potential fact? How do you, if we find out that they are, I mean, I think Alex Wentz point of, well, if Montezuma just prepared himself for Cortez, he would have been much better off. This dovetails nicely with what we were talking about at the top of the episode with COVID-19. No, our civilization is terribly fragile. Our technologies are horrible. I mean, they're not horrible because of like their ability. They're horrible because of their inability because of their fragileness. They're horrible because like you can take it out and it's not hard. I mean, this is, how do you prepare if this happens? You need to be and this has basically been Sovereign Tech's message for, almost a decade. You need to be as little reliant upon civilization and the system as possible, as makes sense. I mean, be practical, sure, but you've got to be as less reliant upon all of this, which is what's going to get disrupted. If, the civilization collapse or social collapse or whatever that would occur. I mean, if COVID-19 didn't tell you, wow, I need to be less reliant upon the system, and I need to be prepared and I need this. And, I don't know what will.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that the system, as you're talking about it, really relies on like the most advanced technology and the greatest resources being confined to a small percentage of the population. And I'm not arguing for like, wealth distribution at all, but if these technologies were widely distributed, if people had access to them, if there were more resources contributed to these sorts of things, it wouldn't be so fragile.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think the biggest problem, like, there's IP law and then there's also, like, government funding.
Yep.
Like, money is such an issue when it comes to this.
Well,
and that contributes to the fragility. Like, most people think that that's actually, like, how you make this system more fortified, is, like, just throwing more money at it. But really, just, like, money is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it gets down to we have an issue where humanity has a water and diamonds problem. Okay, I mean, this is a well-known economic problem where basically you effectively, people they consider diamonds more valuable than water, which doesn't make any sense ultimately, because it's like, wait a minute, you need water to survive. You do not need diamonds to survive. Why are diamonds so highly valued when water is not, and this is still persisting, even though diamonds now get grown in labs and whatever else. This is still persisting, where probably more money gets thrown at finery than it does at, how about we make sure we have drinking water for fucking ever, and it's an odd thing that humans engage in. And it speaks to that there is a problem with priorities on a societal level that I think speaks to what you're talking about. Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, do you have anything to say as far as like, how do you, how does Montezuma prepare for Cortez? If the aliens are here, what do you do?
Oh man, I don't know if I have the right answer for this. I mean, like, I would always approach situations like that, assuming that, people are my comrades. I don't want to go to war with them.
Right.
But if they're bringing the war to me, like, of course I want to be prepared and ready. And I think that it's a beneficial thing to, like, always prepare for the worst, but not expect it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe that was, like, the shortcoming on Montezuma's part, was he just wasn't ready. But maybe they also had technology that Montezuma had never seen before. So I don't know. I mean, like, that's just such a tough question.
Yeah. I think...
Prepare for the worst, but don't expect it.
Right. So, be as little reliant upon the system as possible. And, the answer
be personally responsible for yourself.
Right. I mean, and that gets to personal responsibility, gets to, kind of the ultimate umbrella answer to it, which is be the best fucking human being you can be.
Yeah. Like, if I was living, like, in Montezuma society at the time that Cortez was showing up, or, like, prior to that, spend all of your time, like, working out, training, like, throw spears or something. I don't know. Just teach yourself everything that you can learn.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to survive to survive a virus, to survive any invader. Like, if it's an invader.
Yeah.
And even if it's a peaceful invader, to survive any of that is always to be just at your absolute fucking best, whatever that is for you.
And I imagine those people were really well equipped to, like, know how to survive in the wild, which I think in that situation is also, like, if you have to run away, there's no shame in that.
Right.
Run as fast as you can and go live out in the woods.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think, well, there you go, like, go ahead, let Rome fall and just survive. I don't know. No.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you really value your life, you will find a way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, if Cortez showed up and made an ultimatum and said, like, you're going to serve me or you're going to die. In that case, either you die or you run away.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that you're going to win by fighting back.
Yeah.
If they have superior technology, like, you can't fight fire with fire in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, be the best human you could be, and be prepared, and it's not even, again, I think even, like, preparedness, talk about something that has fucking baggage, right? Like, that's a very loaded term.
Oh, yeah. Everybody thinks about preppers immediately.
Yeah, exactly. So don't think of it that way. Just think of it in the concept of being as now, regardless of what you think about COVID-19, regardless of what you think the reality is around that, it has shown the cracks, in fact, the holes in the system. Okay. It's shown it all. It's shown the fragileness.
Yeah. Especially in the healthcare system.
Exactly. So do whatever you can to just not be reliant upon that fragile system. There you go. Don't think of it as preparedness. Just think of how does, when X happens, how does it not affect me? That's it.
Preparedness takes on so many different forms. Like, if you don't want to rely on the healthcare system, then be the healthiest person you can be. Exercise, eat healthy, take care of yourself. Make sure you don't touch your face when you're out in public.
Yep.
Simple things like that.
I've said this since episode 1 of Sovryn Tech. One of the ways you can defeat the state is to outlive it. Like, just live longer than the state. And I'll tell you, folks, let's just call it. The average age of any empire is 250 years. We're on 244 in the United States. Okay. This is, I'm just going to put that out there. All right. And anyway.
Well, that's a pretty great stat.
Yeah. So, there you have it. Well, what do you got?
I was just going to say, like, you brought up that there's also a taboo around being prepared, but that is one I don't understand. Mm-hmm. Like, I think the taboo around preparedness maybe comes from people preparing for what they foresee as catastrophic events. Mm-hmm. And, like, kind of over preparing in a ridiculous manner, like building a giant underground tunnel and filling it with cans of food and whatnot.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's totally fine. I don't see a problem with that. Mm-hmm. But utterly stupid to not be prepared at all for a sort of emergency. Like, if you did not see COVID-19 coming to the US and you tried to go out to buy your weekly supply of toilet paper, you know, that was tough luck because there was none.
For varying reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, even just being prepared in that sense, I think being prepared in everyday life is a beautiful thing. You know, like, just think about what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after that or the week after that.
Yeah.
You know, there are, like, multiple levels of preparedness that you can achieve. There's, like, the day, the week, the month, the year, 5 years. Right. You know, and those are all things that you have to do in order to be a successful person.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of this doesn't cost money. Like that's another part that I think people miss on, because it's like, oh, well, that's nice that people can afford food stores, you know, or like stores of food and whatever else. And they can afford, you know, I don't know, their underground tunnel or, you know, I mean, I'm not knocking those because I agree with you. I think they're totally valid. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just having the knowledge of how to interact and engage with your environment, you know, and what you can do when these things do occur. You know?
Absolutely. The biggest part of preparedness is just knowing skills.
Yeah, a lot of that knowledge is totally free or accessible for free in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not locked. That kind of stuff isn't locked up in scientific journals. So, you know, get to know. And that speaks well to, you know, if you can do it through fiction as well. I think that's a great way, like learn these skills through fiction or learn about possibilities through fiction. I mean, I've referenced, I don't know how many different movies or shows or books while we were having this conversation around ETs, but that speaks to the point, is that when you like at least give yourself the permission to explore these possibilities, you can consider, okay, what can I do to survive them if they did happen? And so I think exploring fiction is, you know, or doing that through fiction can be really, really key. And that's often free these days.
It can be fun too.
Right.
I think it's so fun to like set up a fictional scenario and imagine like, how do I get out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And again, that doesn't cost anything. You know, you can just do it. So, you know, don't let money stop you in any of this. Okay. Well, speaking of fiction, I think, do you want to shift gears?
Sure. Are we ready to get into the Michael Crichton novel?
Let's do it. Let's talk about none other than the Andromeda Strain. Of course, we're more talking about the film from 1971 of the Michael Crichton book, that being the Andromeda Strain. Now, this is a book that years ago, both of us had actually read. I've been a fan of the movie for some time. And this is your first time having seen it, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we kind of watched this like for my birthday weekend. It was part of that. And I got the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray was a recent re-release with a 4K restoration. I don't care about 4K, but you know, Blu-ray 1080p, I think that's legit. That Arrow Films put out. And so I was really excited to check this out. This is definitely a movie I've been wanting to have in my collection for a while. Just to quickly say on the Blu-ray, not a whole lot of special features, but I am looking forward to listening to the audio commentary of it. But it's something that I only recently got. So it was funny because you and I, Ellen, we were watching Enterprise. We've been doing a rewatch of Star Trek Enterprise. And we got to an episode in the fourth season where, I mean, just days after I had gotten the Blu-ray, and this was just days before we actually watched it, only a couple days before, that Trip, the character of Trip Tucker, the chief engineer aboard the Enterprise, where he mentions the Andromeda Strain. Now, on Enterprise, they'll name drop movies all the time, and they're all Paramount films because at the time Star Trek was Paramount. But I thought it was funny. I was like, wow, that's weird that I just got the Blu-ray for that. And this is something I planned on for a while to watch for like my birthday weekend. Now, the reason that I planned to watch it for my birthday weekend is because I recognize that for a lot of people, this can be seen as a boring film, right? Like it's not the most intense. In fact, it's not except for maybe the last few minutes, and spoiler alerts, folks, but the movie's only been out since 1971.
Who are these people?
Yeah. Except for the last few minutes, like there's no intensity, I mean, there's nothing, like, it's not, it's funny. Just a couple days previous, we watched Demolition Man with Stallone, right?
Yeah.
And these are like night and day.
Oh man, that was practically endless action and glamour and flash and ridiculousness.
Yeah, as to where this is a very straight ahead, accurate, like we talked about earlier in this episode, scientifically accurate, medically accurate film for its time, anyway. But it's from 1971, directed by Robert Wise, who directed Fiddler on the Roof, one of my favorite movies. And he also directed Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which from 1979, which actually is my favorite movie, if I don't apply any of the rules that I usually apply to favorite films. Now, not uninterestingly, Star Trek: The Motion Picture also gets accused of being very boring, and like spends way too much time explaining what's going on and like getting into the nitty gritty and science of it. I think that's what's appealing about it. I happen to also think that's overall what's so appealing about the Andromeda Strain is that, like, it's really meticulous in everything that's going on. Its accuracy and its attention to detail is what part of what makes it such a great movie. Very quickly, would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, of course. And in fact, the film takes itself seriously in that they were trying to paint this as a real occurrence. Right
at the beginning. Yeah, it says like this is the like scariest 96 hours or something in U.S. history. This is from footage.
It's like the real account.
Right.
Of what happened.
They're trying to make you think this is actually declassified information that you're watching in this movie, which is pretty cool. But anyway, continue.
But it has to, by necessity, follow the really slow scientific process.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that makes this film wonderful. I mean, I really enjoyed looking at what they were doing and saying like, oh, I know that method or that piece of equipment. And it was amazing to see, like, if you are in this field, what you do is the same thing it's the same sort of science that anyone would do anywhere in the world.
Right.
At any time in history.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about the scientific method.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Robert Wise, and we'll talk a little bit what the movie's about, and we'll get into it, but I think Robert Wise was wise, I think he was following really the lead, and actually the guy who was in charge of effects for this film was Douglas Trumbull, who's famous for working on 2001. Now in 2001, Stanley Kubrick's operating, like, his method for making that film, his ideology behind the film was, and this isn't controversial, he said it, is that the more real you make this scene, the more people will buy what's happening on the screen. Meaning that you make what's happening, the science of it all, internally consistent and believable. And that will, because of its own internal consistency, people will buy what you're selling, okay, what you're putting down. And I think Doug Trumbull and Robert Wise followed those same rules in making this movie. I think they also did it. I think Robert Wise also did it for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where, all right, make it as internally consistent and plausible as possible and spend the time showing people how internally consistent it is. And they will accept and appreciate more what's going on. They took the rules from 2001, bottom line. Science fiction made today does not follow that rule anymore. Now they just flout the laws of science or even any kind of internal consistency and just don't give a shit about it. But it used to be an important thing. And I think that's why a lot of these movies hold up and stand the test of time. Did you get that sense of internal consistency in this film?
Yeah, as well as external consistency. As in, this really could be plausible. If I didn't already know that it was a science fiction movie, I probably would have believed it was real.
Right.
Because it's literally so real.
Yeah, and they're laying out like when they go to the different levels. Okay, here's the decontamination processes
Yes.
you have to, and they show it all to you.
They explain everything.
Right. And that speaks to what I was saying earlier about how a great way to get a foundation of knowledge in really any field, but certainly in medical, is to take in this stuff that is recognized as being, dead on, right, and being accurate. And then you can learn a lot about how all this works. And when you see them going through Wildfire, which is the scientific or like the base that they set up.
Yeah, it's a code name.
Right, for a base that's set up as a giant lab, really, that goes however many feet or miles underground. It has like 5 different levels, and each one you have to go through different decontamination process and everything. Yeah, I mean, you learn, wow, this is what it takes to really decontaminate and to really like make sure you're like virus free or something. And it's fascinating in my opinion. It's really wild stuff. But so anyway, the movie is basically about a extraterrestrial, of all ironies, virus, and so it actually speaks to both things we've talked about in this episode, COVID-19 and ETs. So
best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's both of them, and they're both out to kill humanity. Anyway. And so this virus is, or what, they're not sure what it is at first, infects this town called Piedmont, New Mexico, kills everybody there. It ends up getting studied, and basically before the lunar missions were done, before the Apollo missions, this lead scientist, Dr. Stone, he recommended to Congress we should set up a lab where we can study, any potential things that come from the lunar missions. And so that's what Wildfire is. And they do set it up, and a scenario happens, like we said, in Piedmont, New Mexico, where they need to do this very thing. And so this is them solving this crisis of what ends up getting codenamed. The virus ends up getting codenamed the Andromeda Strain. And that's what we get in this film. You have 4 main characters, basically, who are like the real heroes. There's Dr. Jeremy Stone, who we mentioned is kind of the team leader. This definitely plays off like a classic 60s Mission Impossible episode in a very real way. And I think I like it because of that, because I'm a big fan of Mission Impossible. There's also very clever use, admittedly. Robert Wise does a great job of using picture-in-picture cinematography to show you what's going on, where there's like multiple things happening on the screen at once in different areas. I thought that was really brilliant. Anyway, you have Dr. Mark Hall, who's kind of the surgeon, really the medical professional here. Dr. Charles Dutton, and then you have Dr. Ruth Leavitt, who... in the book, I think it was actually a guy. I think it was like Paul Leavitt or something like that. Switching it to being a woman, I thought was a brilliant move in this. And she becomes a bit of a crux in the film. She becomes crux and commentary, I think. But she becomes a crux in the film because you find out she has epilepsy. And that creates lapses in judgment or data of trying to solve this. And so it's a very quiet way of creating a tension and all of this. But she also is commentary in speaking of how women scientists were treated at the time. And it's one of the very ahead of time and brilliant moves on the film's part. I mean, what do you say to that with the character? I think she's the best character in the movie. What would you say about
Oh,
Dr.
certainly.
Ruth? She
has the most character of any of them. I mean,
yeah, she's ripping on everybody, government, everybody.
Yeah, she's so scathing, and it's hilarious to see. But you're right. And after we watched this movie, I brought up to you, like, it was amazing how they gave her this condition just so they could have this one scene in the movie where they comment on how if she had told anyone, she wouldn't have been allowed to work in the top labs in the country because of prejudice.
Right. And a guy says, Dr. Stone says
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other guy, who I think is Dr. Hall, says, we're still living in the dark ages.
Right. Now, Robert Wise initially, I guess, he did not approve of the changing of gender of characters, which is actually a very popular thing to happen today. He said at the time, he's like, no, give me a really great reason to do it. And I think the writer gave him a great reason, which is exactly what you spoke about. It's like, here's our chance to comment on, even though she's the best in the field and ahead of the curve and open-minded to things that the other three doctors were not. And she's no Mary Sue, because again, she has epilepsy, right? I mean, like that's just not part of it. This is why this movie, part of why this movie is so great. The writing, everything makes sense. Everything has a reason. Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant move, and I don't think Michael Crichton ever complained.
Yeah, and even at the beginning of the movie, when the team first assembles in Wildfire, and they go off to their separate locker rooms or whatever, and they're getting ready for decontamination. I think it was Dr. Hall who's like, "Why? Who invited her here?" And Mr. Stone is like, "Well, she's the best in the field. We're lucky to have her." Yeah. And it was just so factual and just put that prejudice right down.
Yeah. So a movie that accurately reflected, not just how medicine, how science, and a lot of this like scenarios would have been handled in 1970 or 1971, but it also, really showed the culture, of those fields at the time. And so it's certainly a time capsule. Unfortunately, you kind of got to wonder if how much has changed as far as culturally, in all of that.
It's funny you keep saying culture because she's a microbiologist and that's what she does. She cultures cells.
It's punny. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep wanting to say that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, so like there's one scene where I think the tension gets the highest, where she is looking at a bunch of cultures and like you notice that she's completely like her eyes are glazed over and she's not paying attention. And that's when you realize like this epilepsy is really a problem. Yeah.
And I mean, because there's a point where she has a stroke, foaming at the mouth, the whole thing.
Well, that's a full on seizure.
Or I'm sorry. Yeah. Full on seizure. And like the reaction to these people who are working in the most advanced medical lab, arguably in the world, Wildfire, they think she's infected and they won't touch her. And it's like, no, and Dr. Hall's there saying, it's like, no, she's having a seizure. Like, come help her, get me this down here. She's not infected. Stop, and so like even displaying like the reality of this film is what's so powerful about it, because even that is showing, even people that have the knowledge, well, tensions are high enough, they're going to fuck up. Right.
Yeah.
And I also, I really loved even the character of Dr. Hall, because he's the one that, so Wildfire is set up that if they can't solve the problem, a nuke goes off. Right.
Right. To destroy the entire facility. So there's no chance of contamination.
Exactly. Now, what they find out with the Andromeda strain is that actually a nuclear explosion would feed it. And it would mutate and it would probably end up wiping out, like that would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to it, which I also like that too, because that basically and this movie ripped on government pretty well.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole thing, ripping on the president, everything, which you're not going to get that.
And
today.
His advisors.
Yeah. It's like, you idiots, and, but it was great because it showed, the military can't solve this and a nuke cannot solve this problem. In fact,
it's just going to make it worse.
Right. Which I thought was really cool. But now, so Dr. Hall is chosen as the guy who is the one that can stop the nuke from going off. He has a key to stop it, right?
Yeah, and it's really strange how they choose him. They show him like test results and statistical analysis showing that like a single male is the best person to make this kind of decision. And they compared it to like single females, married men, married women, and like somehow single males can make the best judgment.
Yeah, well, I think so Dr. Stone calls it the odd man out hypothesis, and I think that's something Michael Crichton made up. But anyway, the idea is that that's the person that has maybe nothing to lose, and that if the nuke has to go off, he's not worried. Oh, but my daughter. Oh, but my, like he's the guy that would have the guts basically to do it. And there's probably why a single woman wouldn't. Maybe they would say, oh, but her motherly platitudes. I mean, so even then, I'm sure there's some degree of what could be seen as sexism or so on, that would be there. But that is interesting. But what's really interesting about that is that they definitely play him off. And Dr. Ruth, comments on this often, that he's an arrogant asshole. Like he's kind of a superstar surgeon, and he's a jerk.
Well, because he's the best surgeon,
right,
in his field.
Right. I mean, so he can. It's not boasting if you can back it up, right? I mean,
exactly.
So it seems like he could back it up. But I thought it was interesting in that he's the one that actually becomes really selfless and takes on at the end, because he has to climb up this tube where there's like these security lasers that are frying you. And he gets shot up a couple times, by these lasers. And the fact that, like, don't judge the book by its cover, right? Okay, you think he's this arrogant asshole, but actually he's the most empathetic of the bunch. And they keep showing that throughout the film, even though you think he's this jerk, like he's really flamboyant or he's really arrogant or whatever. He's the one who's always like, hey, those aren't test subjects. Those are people down there.
Yeah, that was a really interesting character trait. And I think it does go to show, like, even if you are like proud of your accomplishments, even if you know that you're a very skilled person and you don't mind saying so, that doesn't mean that you don't care about other people.
Yeah. So I thought that was
and it's strange that you even say that he's being a jerk, but he's the most empathetic one. Like, what does that mean in the context of this film, being a jerk? It's not like he was rude to anyone.
No, but I think they kind of like play it off as that. And even like one of the better lines, or one of the best lines in the movie, is where they're going through, Hall and Stone are going through the town of Piedmont, and like they're trying to figure out what happened, and he just like tears this guy's pants off, and he says to Dr. Stone, he says, "Look at this man's buttocks," and Dr. Stone's like, "That's not funny," because like I guess he thinks he's like a prankster or something, like he just has this reputation. And so I feel like they try to lead that, but this actually leads to one of the problems with the film, and let me know if you agree. The character development, while there's some interesting things in it, the character development's a little shallow.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you don't get to see what these people's lives are really like before the wildfire incident happens.
Right.
But
you get some quick shots,
you do get a brief introduction before they go into the facility. But yeah, that is one thing that the film could have improved on a little more, is like, we want to know these people. Although they do get, they each get their own character development moments.
Sure. Yeah. It does feel like one of the failings. And I think besides the thrilling climb against all the laser turrets, that Dr. Hall goes on at the end, again, there's like no like action scene really at all.
Well, when the alarm first starts going off, when there's a breach, contamination breach.
Yeah.
And one of the doctors, I think it was Dutton, he was stuck in the laboratory.
Right.
And he was talking to Stone via camera, saying like, "Oh, I'm really scared."
Yeah, tensions get heightened in the last 15 minutes of this movie. And it's a 2-hour film, okay? And everything happens in the last like 15 minutes, basically. And I think it's a payoff. I think it's a worthy payoff. What do you got?
I don't know. I don't agree with that. I mean, the whole film is the process of discovery.
Yeah, right.
And that is the thrilling part of it.
Yeah.
There's more excitement in the last 15 minutes, I'll give you that. But, I mean, the thrill is building as you make discoveries about the Andromeda Strain.
Yeah. Now, I don't disagree with you. Like, I actually... So basically, it's hour 45 minutes of process, 15 minutes of action. What do you say to that? Or 15 minutes of tension and emotion and action.
Okay.
Me personally, I like the hour and 45 minutes a lot better. Okay. I've said this actually about another Michael Crichton film. I say this often. I love the first 45 minutes of Jurassic Park. The other hour, I take it or leave it, like all the action and the thrill and all. I don't care, like that's nice. But I loved just seeing a possible representation of what something like a Jurassic Park would look like. Just like in this, I love the concept of wildfire, and what that, not from government funding, of course, but I love the concept in the abstract, and like this whole process and seeing that process, that's what's really cool to me. I don't think there's many people anymore that are into things that way. And that's a shame, but because that's like I mentioned, Mission Impossible, the 60s Mission Impossible was not the action schlock, which I still like the new Mission Impossible movies too. But the 60s Mission Impossible, it was all process, until like the last 5 minutes. But I like that. I like that kind of storytelling. I like seeing how the sausage gets made, I guess. So I'm with you. I think that, but I wouldn't have minded if there was a little more thrill somewhere in there. There's a little problem.
There were more tensions too. Like they had communications breakdowns where there was supposed to be like a 712 or something like that. There was supposed to be a nuke dropped on the city in New Mexico where the plague first struck, but it wasn't happening, right. And they kept trying to send messages out. And they weren't being received for some reason. Finally, they get through to the people in Washington saying, like, you need to drop this nuke right now.
Right.
And then they discover, like, oh, shit, this thing is going to absorb the radiation and grow like crazy. So then they have to, like, get back to them really quickly and say, don't do it. So there's another point of tension. There's plenty of, I think, things that are really thrilling about this movie. And I don't think that you have to have like shooting and stabbing to achieve that.
I agree. No, I agree with you. I think so. Talk about some of the particulars of the film. I think the effects there's actually really, really early CGI in that. Really early. And it looks great. I think to this day, it still looks really, really solid. That was cool. I mean, I think technically this is a perfect film. What would you say to that?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I have no problems with it.
Like there's nothing wrong with it,
No,
like as far as presentation.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, Robert Wise, of course, is one of the greatest directors to ever live. I mean, I think he delivered on this and delivered something very, very unique. The music is very interesting. Because it's an all electronic score, kind of like Forbidden Planet, but there's so little of it. In fact, it's mainly just used to transition between scenes. It's rarely ever used during the scenes. And that was clever because you're trying to create a quiet tension within the process.
Yeah.
And then when the music does hit, it hits you twice as hard. Go ahead.
Yes. And it also makes you feel like you're actually there in the room with them.
Right. Yeah. Oh, no. See, I never exactly thought about that. That's a great perspective because you're right. That makes it all the more real because when you're conducting surgery, there wouldn't be music behind you. Well, okay, I know some surgeons who actually do play music when they are in surgery. But
when you're 5 stories underground and
you're not playing
looking
music
at cultures,
right?
No music.
Yep. That's very true. It's very true. Did you ever watch House?
Occasionally.
Yeah. I think House basically just lifted the Andromeda Strain and they just put like a whack job in charge, who was like a drug addict or whatever. And I hate that. I don't have a problem with drugs. I don't like it when a drug addict is like, I see it as easy heat, like easy, it's like easy drama, oh, he has a drug problem. Oh yeah. Oh, this is so tragic, it's to where it's just, it's a cheap shot in my opinion. But anyway, nobody in this movie had that.
Well, no, but Ruth was addicted to smoking.
Oh, that's,
she couldn't have any cigarettes when she was down there. No
she
caffeine.
Kept commenting about it.
They couldn't even eat sugar. They had to eat these nutritional pills and this drink that had vitamins dissolved in it.
Yeah. Another thing, I think this movie is laugh out loud funny. Like, and like the jokes land even to this day. I think they land.
One of the other really great characters in this movie was a survivor from the town of New Mexico, or the town in New Mexico. Yeah. So there were 2 survivors. There's a 5-month-old baby and a 69-year-old man. Yeah. And this man, he drank
a Sterno drinker.
He drank Sterno. He did all sorts of, I don't know what else he did, but he drank Sterno to help with his stomach ulcers. And like one of the first things he asked for when he woke up was like, "Give us a butt, will you?"
Yeah. Or he's looking over at the woman helping out Dr. Hall, the nurse. He's like, "You're the nurse?" Yeah. Shame I can't see her legs. She's in like this full suit.
He's even like trying to feel her up, which is so terrible, but it was really funny because she's in this giant suit.
But it's real, like that. That's probably how that'd go down. And so it's outrageous.
What did he call this Sterno originally? He was like, "I do the dragon tail" or something like that.
Something like, yeah.
And the Dr. Hall's like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Not gonna tell you.
Not gonna tell you." And then, I mean, I don't know if I want to give it away, but I think it's the best. It's one of the best scenes of the film, if not the best. And so funny, like, because the baby's always crying.
Yeah,
obviously.
The baby is just a constant screamer.
Yeah, and especially because they're not feeding it, because they're trying to find out what's wrong, and they're seeing, like, you know, if not giving it food, you know, would be part of, like, why did the baby survive, you know? And so it's just constantly crying. And there's a point where just the guy, like, there's a camera in the room where the 69-year-old man, I think his name's Jim or whatever, and the baby are there. And he just kind of walks by and like the nurse is saying, "Can I please feed this baby?" And the guy, and you just see his head kind of float by. He's like, "This is a hell of a way to run a hospital." It's just so goddamn funny. And Ruth she's hilarious. Like when she sees blinking lights in the beginning, she kind of like holds her head against it and you don't know what's going on. Eventually you realize that she's epileptic. But, you know, the guy's like, "What, you don't?" He's like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "You know, you don't like red lights?" He's like, "Yeah, it just reminds me of my time when I was a hooker or something like that."
When she lived in the bordello district.
Oh yeah, when she lived in the bordello district. It was so great. So I mean, yeah, it's such a solid film. I mean, I get it, like that there's it feels like there's not a lot going on. It's plotting with D instead of T's. You know, I understand where people see that, but then they're not appreciating, like, this is how hyper real this film is. And I think it just deserves a ton of respect for that alone. Like, this is how it would really get done. And if you're somebody who actually appreciates, kind of like we were talking about you earlier, Ellen, when you appreciate the process, this movie's a masterpiece. I mean, like, I imagine doctors and scientists looking at wildfire at that lab the way I look at, like, a model of the Enterprise.
We're just salivating over it. Like, oh, that sterilization is so perfect.
Right. I can totally imagine. You're just like, I wish I had wildfire. Oh, it's so hot.
I would do anything to work in that laboratory.
Right. I could totally picture that. I mean, come on, seriously, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's great, even if that's not exactly like my speed. I totally respect that. I think that's dynamite, you know, to give people that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think it's a brilliant film. You got more comments you want to make on it? Anything you want to add in?
Yeah, I thought, like, the revelation of the Andromeda Strain was not disappointing. Like, you finally get to see it under a microscope.
Oh yeah.
And it looks beautiful.
Right.
Like, and the explanations for how it does what it does are so spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just really incredible. And it's something that I felt was really plausible. I never doubted it the entire time. And that's kind of what made the film so fun.
Yeah.
It's like, you're looking at this thing under the microscope and it's replicating, but it's not like tribbles where they just replicate infinitely without a food source. Like, this thing can consume light, you know, X-ray radiation.
Right.
So yeah, it's just really amazing to see that and to be able to believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, so correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, ultimately what happens is the Andromeda Strain basically mutates to a non-lethal form.
Yeah, so there's a point in the film where a guy is flying over the town in New Mexico where everyone was wiped out.
Right.
And
in a jet, in a Phantom F4.
Yeah. And he crashes.
Yeah.
And they find out that, like, something ate away literally all of the plastic in the plane, as well as his flesh.
Right.
And this happens, and then it happens just about, like, slightly afterwards in the wildfire facility, where the mutation occurs to where it starts eating away all of the seals in the facility are made out of plastic.
The rubber or whatever, yeah. Or it's plastic.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how the contamination first occurs, like the containment breach, and the alarm starts going off, and he has to run to shut off the nuclear device. But essentially what happens is all the plastic gets eaten away, and it's not killing anything anymore, which originally it killed things so fast they were making comments like, you couldn't get death that quickly if you slit his throat.
Right.
You know, it was like within a few seconds of being exposed, you were just dead. And the way this thing worked was it was like coagulating your blood on contact.
Yeah.
So anyway, it mutates to where it doesn't do that anymore, but now it just eats all the plastic and it escapes the facility and travels around the world.
Yeah, I mean, they set up like things in the clouds, they say, basically, that would help kind of neutralize it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think in the novel, actually, what happens is it ends up going back out into space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just leaves the Earth because it's not it doesn't grow as well in oxygen as it does in, like, a complete vacuum with X-rays.
Right. So, because it initially comes from a satellite that crashes.
Right.
And yeah. Now, I mean, there's one, I want to speak to that because there's one other point. There is a confrontation. And in this movie, all confrontations are pretty low key by comparison. Where the other doctors basically find out, hey, wait a minute, wildfire is being used by the military to test or prepare for biowar.
Yeah, they see like bio-war maps.
Yeah. And they get pissed off about it. And Dr. Stone tries to like write it off. It's like, you don't understand what they're doing. And they're like, no, we're not working for the fucking military. We're not doing this. That's not what this is about and all that, which I thought that was a great message too.
Yeah, the scientists really don't want to be working for any sort of war.
Right. And actually at the beginning of the film, Ruth, she's basically telling, because the army goes to pick up everybody to take them to wildfire. And Ruth is like, I'm not going with you. Fuck you. Get out of here. You know.
Yeah,
like,
tell him I burned my draft card.
Yeah, that's actually that's what she says. She's like, yeah, I burned my draft card. You know. But.
And then they show up to the facility and there's a cornfield and she's like, well, there's a heck of a way to grow pot.
Yeah. But I mean, the funny thing is I feel like one of the messages of the film, if not maybe the ultimate message of it, like humanity doesn't solve this.
No.
They survive it, but like
they're lucky.
Yeah. And in fact, wildfire doesn't even, it allows them to understand it, but it doesn't give them the resolution. It doesn't give them the solution.
No, it just gives them enough time to where it mutated so it could escape and leave.
Right.
Which is really fortunate. Like, they do mention that every time this thing replicates, it's also mutating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like constantly mutating and growing.
Right.
So I guess it was just a matter of time until it became non-lethal. But there was no way for them to know that in the beginning.
Yeah, so I think it has a very interesting message of the hubris of man to think that he can somehow solve or control, nature.
There are definitely things beyond our control.
Yeah.
And, throwing a nuke at it's not going to solve it.
Nope, right. And that, wildfire, the military, whatever their intentions were for it, all of that. None of that. And this movie also does a great job of making the military look like idiots because
yeah,
like they're kind of like the lead general or whatever is like, oh, that pilot just crashed.
It was a fluke.
It was a fluke. That's what happened, and again, you're almost never going to get that in modern cinema where unless they want to make fun of the president that's in office at the time, you'll never see the military really get ripped on anymore in movies. So you got to love it for that. I think it has some very powerful, accurate, scientifically accurate messages. And it shows what a real life scenario like this, I think, could look like. I mean, I imagine there's things like wildfire on Earth, that there's like disaster scenario labs like that. Just a fascinating film to watch. What would you give it out of 10?
Oh gosh. See, you asked me this yesterday and I said 8, but I feel like now I want to bump it up to a 9.
Wow. Right on.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that it's missing is the character development.
Yep.
And like a little bit more excitement.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree. That's the only thing keeping it from being like an absolute 10.
Yeah.
Because if you had a little more of that, I think everybody would recognize it as holy shit, what a movie.
Again, it's technically perfect.
Yeah, right. And it's, again, accurate. I mean, it's arguably science fiction. It is dealing with ETs. It is dealing with,
of course.
I mean, this is as hard a hard science fiction movie as you could get. I mean, I can't think of one harder. And I love it for it. And so, yeah, I will definitely second that 9 out of 10 and for the same reasons that you mentioned. Again, the music's very unconventional, but I think it totally, totally works. I haven't heard an unconventional score. The only other movie I can think of instantly when I think of really unconventional use of scores would be The Matrix with Don Davis and him eschewing melody throughout the entire film. I thought that was brilliant and adds to the nature of what's going on and to the surrealness of what's going on. And in this movie, I think the lack of music, it's almost like a great drummer that knows when not to play. and it just worked. So yeah, technically this movie's absolutely perfect. Presentation wise, absolutely perfect. So yeah, 9 out of 10. And then the night after, we watched the Andromeda Strain. We watched Blade. We watched Wesley Snipes, 1998 classic Blade.
Tons of vampire action.
That's action. And, I mean, I've said this on Sovereign Tech before, because I think I might have even reviewed the movie before. We won't necessarily review it here, but that was a stark contrast. But I was telling you, I was like, now, if we ever watch Blade 2 is the movie that I tell everybody where that was the first time where I watched a movie and I sat down and I said, you know what? I think that was too much action.
Too much action.
It is the antithesis of the Andromeda Strain. I mean, it absolutely is. But maybe we'll get to watching that at some point. But Blade that was fun. Yeah.
That's a review for another time.
That's a review for another time. I will say this. All right, let me get this out. Let me end this off with a unique thought. Because we're over 3 hours. This might be the longest episode of Sovereign Tech ever.
You say that every time I'm on.
I know. But that's it. When you get, well, all right, I'm just going to say it. When you get two brilliant fucking people in a room, I mean, hit the mics and let's see what happens.
Yes.
So, anyway, I had an epiphany while we were watching Blade. There is a point, and we talked about this morning over breakfast. There was a point where the character, the main villain, Deacon Frost, is sitting in his apartment bedroom. This bedroom is all white, looks very advanced, has this very interesting bed that's like a clamshell bed where the top actually lowers down as well on it. And it's nice red, velvet or whatever is inside there. But you could see where it'd be like it'd block out the sun, obviously.
Block out all light.
Yeah, it'd block out like almost all senses.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sensory deprivation tank of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in this really like classy white room. Everything's bright white, very clean and all this, and clearly like if you wanted to see blood somewhere, that's a room where you'd see it because everything's white. And like it has this it looks very futuristic. But the movie doesn't take place in the future. It's just in 1998. But there's one thing that looks out of place in that room. Now he's dressing in black, which I think is to like set him apart from the room. But also he has an Apple laptop, an old PowerBook in there, which would have been the modern computer at the time and one of the most powerful laptops in the world, quite frankly. And it has the old Apple logo on it. This is before they even did the iMac thing and everything. I saw that PowerBook and I was like, now those kinds of deals with Apple, those were just starting to become a thing. Like Independence Day made a big deal about having an Apple laptop, like they did commercials about it and everything. Those kind of movie deals were not, it's not as commonplace now. We're now sure everybody in movies has an Apple because supposedly they matter when, and it's what cool people use when that's not even remotely the truth. But I think Steve Jobs probably asked, because he had just come back in as CEO. And I think he probably asked, so let's look at our present contracts, where are Apple's showing up and everything. Where can I show off the iMac? He was probably taking inventory of that. And I bet he saw that movie. I think he saw Blade. I think he saw that room and he saw his ugly ass, by comparison, his ugly ass PowerBook in that room. And he went, oh no, we've got it all wrong. Like, I would not be surprised, actually, if Johnny Ives, or is either Jobs or Johnny Ives, the designer, okay? I would not be surprised if they saw that movie, they saw that room, and they saw the Apple in there, and they said, holy shit, that room is the future, and our computers look all wrong. And Blade literally reinvigorated Apple computers without them even knowing it. I think this movie, the Blade is an important movie in a lot of ways because it's also like one of the few genuinely great comic book movies. And it's very adult. Anyway, I could get into a big conversation about that. We'll do the review another time.
Yeah.
But I just want to bring this up. I'm serious. I think, and I've never seen, and I've read plenty of books about how, the Johnny Ives came up with his ideas. I don't know. He was doing LSD or some shit. Who knows? Whatever. I think where it really came from, I think they watched Blade. Because David Goyer, who wrote that, he is brilliant. I think they saw that and they said, holy shit, that's what our computers need to look like. They need to look like they would fit in that room, or they need to look like that room. And that started the whole goddamn thing.
They wanted to class up the apple.
Really, I think that's it. I think that's because they were trying to get into colleges, and that's certainly where Apple dominated, right? Like the reason most people, I know we got to wrap this up, but the reason most people have an Apple is not because they buy Apple computers. It's because their parents buy them because you get a discount if you're a student at a college. Okay, a significant one at that. It's because their parents buy it for them. And Apples are such good computers, and they are. They're such good computers that they last for like a decade. Okay, so most people that have an Apple, they actually don't have the latest Apple. They have one from 5 years ago that's still running great. And kudos to that, okay? But bottom line being is that that's why it seems like the cool people have Apples, right? It's because, I mean, effectively, once these young people get into their 30s, then they all buy PCs because they have to pay for it themselves, you know, and they don't have the money that their parents had or whatever. You know, so I think Apple probably, all right, we want that crowd that goes to those kinds of parties or whatever, you know, right? Or we want that younger crowd that the vampires were kind of representing. And the vampires are also representative of a degree of immortality, right? I think they saw their demographic. They saw what they were going for, and they said, our computers look like shit in that demographic, and we've got to appeal to that. And I think Blade, Steve Jobs did not reinvigorate Apple. Johnny Ives did not reinvigorate Apple. I think the movie Blade did. They owe David Goyer a check. That's the bottom line. So that's what I've got. Anyway, check it out, folks. Go ahead, look it up. You go watch the movie. You're going to see that room like 2 or 3 times in the film. It's fairly prominent. Prominent things happen there. And you see that, especially in 1080p, you see that laptop and you see that Apple logo. No problem. You can't fucking miss it. And I think that's where everything changed. So just a theory on my part. Anyway, that was fun. Ellen, thank you so much for being on the show again. And sorry about my little diatribe at the end, because everything you had to say in this episode was far more fascinating than anything I had to lay out. But you enjoyed Blade, right?
Yeah. And I enjoy that you tell people about our breakfast conversations, too.
Yeah, I do tell them a lot of shit, don't I?
We have great breakfast conversations.
Yeah, they're fucking amazing. Talk about a place we should have a microphone, man. Ooh, yeah, some mornings. I mean, there was that one morning where we literally, over breakfast, we were having oatmeal. We solved every single problem on the planet, but then we forgot. And,
yeah,
you know...
Yeah, you know, this is just, we're making a tribute to that.
There's that Tenacious D. Woo, yeah,
this
baby.
Is not the greatest song in the world. It's just a tribute.
This is not the greatest breakfast conversations. That one's for you, Chris, baby. Anyway, yeah, well, anyway, so a lot of fun. We will wrap this one up, and we will see all of you on the other side. And hey, I'm sure we'll have Ellen back a lot.
I'll be back.
Ooh, I like that. All right, let's see you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.
Hey there, Sovryn Tech listeners. You know, I had a thought. I said, this episode's already so long. Why don't I, as a bonus, after the credits roll, why don't I go ahead and have Alexander Wendt talk for himself in his TEDx talk, which is linked in the show notes. But I thought, you know, it's 12 minutes or so. It'd actually be a lot of fun to just include it in the episode in case you want to hear it here. So I'm not going to come back at the end of it. I'm just going to let this ride out, but about 13 minutes. This is from February 4th, 2020. Link is in the show notes if you actually want to see the video. But I thought it'd be great. I talked with Ellen about it. She thought it'd be a cool idea to have it be all inclusive. So you can hear that big conversation we had. You can actually hear the audio of the video of Alexander Wendt with his TEDx talk at TEDx Columbus. So without further ado, I will leave it here with Alexander Wendt. Enjoy.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Alex Wendt. I'm a professor of political science here at Ohio State. Before that, I taught at Yale, Dartmouth, and the University of Chicago. I'm well known in my field of international relations, and I have a serious reputation that I have no intention of squandering today. And I say that because what I'm going to do today is break a taboo deeply held in the scientific and academic community especially, but also in the government, the news media, and all modern institutions of modern society hold this taboo. And the taboo is on taking UFOs seriously. And by that I mean three things. First, there's a taboo on admitting in public that UFOs exist, that they're real. Second, that some of those UFOs might be extraterrestrial. And third, it's also forbidden to do science on UFOs to find out one way or the other. And I want to say a few more words about that last point because it's kind of surprising when you think about it. Human beings are incredibly curious creatures. We will study anything we do not understand if given the possibility. In fact, we are so curious that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars building giant radar telescopes to look for signs of intelligent life around distant stars, for which there's no evidence whatsoever. But when it comes to UFOs, not a cent. The scientific community has never done any serious, sustained, systematic study of UFO phenomena. And that's in spite of the fact that if it were found that some UFOs were ETs, or extraterrestrials, it would be one of the most important events in human history. And yet scientists give us only silence and or ridicule for people who are UFO believers. Okay? And of course that's because they believe that UFOs don't exist. So my first challenge in challenging this taboo is to make the case that UFOs actually are real phenomena. And to do that, I need to start with a very clear definition of what a UFO is. Most of us, when we hear the term, we automatically associate UFOs with ETs, little green men, although it turns out they're probably gray, but little green men who pilot UFOs. And that equation of UFO and ETs is fundamentally mistaken. Okay? A UFO is nothing but an unexplained aerial phenomenon. And you can divide these into roughly two groups. The larger group is cases where, with a bit more study, a bit more probing, we could probably figure out that the likely explanation for this UFO was a stealth fighter, or a drone, or some kind of natural phenomenon, satellites or whatever. Okay? Those are uninteresting UFOs. Let's call them temporary UFOs. Okay? The kind of UFOs I'm interested in, let's call genuine, and this is about 5 to 20% of the cases that we have. And these are cases of UFOs that don't have an obvious conventional explanation. And these are the ones that I'm interested in for the rest of the talk today. Okay? And what I want to do now is bring in the authority of the US Navy to help me make the case that genuine UFOs are real. And to do that, I need to do a bit of background and talk about pilot reports. Okay? Civilian and military pilots have been reporting UFOs since World War II. Some pilots have reported their incidents to their commanding officers or whatever. Many pilots have not because of fears of ridicule and so on. But in the past few years, fighter pilots especially in the United States and elsewhere have begun to become more and more vocal about what they perceive as the safety hazards that UFOs pose to their personal operations in the sky. In particular, UFOs routinely penetrate prohibited military airspaces, and more from the pilot's point of view of concern, UFOs sometimes fly dangerously close to pilots themselves, literally 50 feet away. And so pressure from the pilots led the US Navy this year, and this was a big story in the New York Times, led the US Navy to an official policy change on how they handle UFO reporting. In the past, they would always ignore their pilots' reports. Now they are working on a procedure to require their pilots to report something. Okay? So the US Navy has taken a big step in this way. And in justifying this policy change publicly, one thing they've done is they released 2 very short clips, video clips, of UFOs that their fighter pilots had taken. They probably have dozens or maybe hundreds of these clips, who knows, but these are the 2 they've released. They're about a minute long, and I want to just play them for you so that you can get a sense of what a genuine UFO looks like. Okay.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating. Nickel 6-1 Tango Project, over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting as soon as I get... Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
All right, so those are two UFO reports from fighter pilots just from a couple years ago. If you notice in the very first one, the guy said, did you know there's a fleet of them out there? So it wasn't just one, there was a whole fleet of those things that was flying. But whatever you or I may think is in those videos, the Navy has officially classified them as unidentified. And what that means is that they've done some homework and they've basically ruled out all the standard conventional explanations for these two cases and probably many other cases as well. And so what they're in effect saying is there's something on that video, it's real, it's not a hoax or it's not an illusion, there's something on that video, those videos, it's real, but they just don't know what it is. Okay. So to my mind, the Navy has just proven or at least established that genuine UFOs are real. Now, are they ETs also? That's a totally separate question, okay? It's quite possible that even those genuine UFOs have no ETs involved in them at all, okay? But it's important in this respect to, I think, listen to the pilots, okay? Well, actually, on the UFO ET question, the Air Force said nothing, or the Navy said nothing about ETs at all when they released those videos. Neither pro nor con, okay? So nobody has a clue. But it's important, I think, to listen to the pilots because they have reported many times UFOs having aerodynamic capabilities that seem to far exceed anything possessed by human societies. For example, right turns at 5,000 miles an hour, extraordinary rates of acceleration, and so on. Things that seem impossible according to our laws of physics. On the other hand, just a little over a century ago, our laws of physics told us that air travel was impossible, much less space travel. So imagine a civilization that's just 1,000 years ahead of us, which is really just a blip historically. Imagine what kind of technology they would have, much less a civilization that is 1,000,000 years ahead of us. Okay? To us, what they could do in our skies might look like complete magic. So I think if we're totally honest with ourselves, we have to admit first, with the Navy, that genuine UFOs are real, okay? And secondly, that we really have no idea, that we are ignorant, not only of what the UFOs are, but we're ignorant of whether or not they're ETs, okay? And that leads to my punchline, okay? Which is that if any UFOs are ETs, then we are not only ignorant, but in my view, we are truly stupid if we're not using science to try to find out what's going on. And because the first question that comes up, if they are here, if they are here, the first question that comes up is, well, why, okay? And there are a lot of options here, which we have no clue about, but just consider a couple examples. It might be an Independence Day scenario. So they're here to exterminate us, and they just haven't gotten around to it yet, okay? On the other hand, they might be here to help with climate change, okay? But they're reluctant to land on the White House lawn because they know that if they do so, there'll be a panic in the streets, the stock market will collapse, and governments will lose control. Either way, any kind of up-close personal contact between human beings and an alien civilization here on our planet would be an extraordinarily profound and probably disruptive event for all of humanity, okay? And that alone, to me, justifies investing in a science of UFOs to find out what all this is about. So what would such a science look like? There are different models for this that have been proposed. The one I like is the idea of a ground-based network of automated surveillance stations, each of them equipped with the sky cameras like this guy, but also other simple instruments. And they would monitor the sky 24/7 looking for UFOs. Anything comes along, they immediately start recording as much data as they can. Okay. Ideally, the government or the scientific community would build such a network, but they're still in UFO denial. Those are heads in the sand right there. So we're unlikely, I think, to see governments funding UFO research anytime soon, despite the Navy admitting that UFOs are real. Okay? The good news, though, and ironically, is that this is not rocket science. Okay? The camera technology we have today is extremely sophisticated and also surprisingly cheap. So in my view, it would be possible to organize and build the building of such a network through a scientific nonprofit funded essentially through the internet by crowdfunding. Okay. Either way, a top-down science or a bottom-up science, it seems to me that applying some science to this phenomenon would tell us something more than we know now, which is essentially nothing. Okay. So 2 last final points. First of all, why is this a taboo at all? Okay. Why is it that pilots, scientists, even political scientists, need to worry about their reputations to talk about this issue in public? Okay. Why don't we treat UFOs the way we treat everything else that we don't understand, which is the scientists all go rush and try to study it. But in this case, the scientists won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I think a clue to this idea of why the taboo exists is in the word taboo itself, because taboos are about fear. Cultural fears, usually. And I think my suggestion here is that perhaps the reason this taboo is so powerful is that we are afraid, subconsciously, of what we might find out if we actually opened up the door of science and tried to understand what these phenomena are. Okay. But that leads to my second point, and the last thing I'll say, which is that in my view, the first responsibility of academics is to tell the truth. And the truth is, we have no idea what UFOs are, and no one in a position of power or authority is trying to find out. That should surprise and disturb us all, and I think raises the question of whether the people should try to find out for themselves first instead. Thank you.